I was barely here. Another person was literally an inch away from their mic. Well, the people that seemed if the mic was like it is now. I know Peggy has a quiet voice, so she has to do her thing. But I think for the most part, everybody can be aware where they are in position and make sure we're kind of a consistency. What was happening last night with the volume control, you have to go up and down depending on who's speaking. And if you're too close, it certainly sounds like puffing into the mic. And I know Jim has done a good job trying to keep us all on track. Who? Me? You? Yeah. So anyway, that's just a reminder.
Okay. Thank you.
Like Tony was like doing exactly what I was talking about.
Am I puffing?
Well, you'll be heard, but then nobody else will be. I think I was in a way.
How's that?
Not very good.
Council, in 1974, the city established the concrete replacement program whereby a resident pays 50% of the cost to have their curb gutter and sidewalk repaired and replaced by the city staff. Basically, the 50% covers the materials. Sometime in the late 1990s or early 2000, the program was modified to allow people to replace driveway approaches. The driveway would have been perfectly good, but they wanted to eliminate that bump, or what we call the Hollywood rollover curb, into a driveway. Since then, our program has been dominated by people wanting to have their driveway bump removed. As I indicate in the staff report, 90% of what we do now is perfectly good driveway replacements. Last summer, we had an engineering student from the University of Colorado do a survey of literally every single sidewalk, curb, and gutter in the entire city. And we have a list of what we call the number one rated sidewalks. Those are the ones that are in the worst condition, that are hazardous and or unsafe. I believe the intent of the program has drifted away from replacing hazardous sidewalks to replacing driveway bumps. And Council, I believe it's time to present to you a proposed change so that we get back to our original intent, and that is modifying the program so that we do not do driveway bumps any longer, but we do the hazardous and unsafe sidewalks that exist all over the city. And we have this survey that was conducted, and we can contact those property owners that are actually the far worst ones, where pedestrian activity is the highest. And as you see in the staff report, I indicate we would look for areas around schools, the museum, library, downtown, RTD facilities as well, where people wouldn't naturally walk to these locations, but there are some bad sidewalk sections. So bad that in some places you don't even want to walk on the sidewalk, you want to walk on the street. And we've actually have a photograph of each location of these sidewalks and an address. So it would take some time to locate the property owner, but that can be done through the internet. Send a letter to the property owner indicating to them that we would replace their sidewalk at 50% of the going rate, which is a bargain, let me tell you, a significant bargain for that property owner. Again, the intent of what we're trying to do here is to press people into replacing bad sidewalks in areas where pedestrians are prevalent, and we would then drift away from doing the bump that leads into people's driveways. Again, 90% of those are perfectly good sections of concrete that people have taken advantage of this program to replace. Meanwhile, there's a lot of bad sidewalk and curb and gutter out there that we believe is hazardous and unsafe. With that introduction, I'll be glad to address any questions if you want any more details.
I have two questions. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Didn't see your hand till after I looked there. Who is responsible if somebody would fall on that sidewalk?
Well, we need to have an agreement in place, and we're looking at that right now because we don't have a very good one, and we can shift liability. So. Okay,
so that may be something we also want to do.
Yes, exactly.
And then, Charlie, you guys came out a year or so ago on my corner and used some of that new kind of stuff to just make a little, ramp, a teeny little ramp to take care of the leverage that was there. Would you be able to do that with some of this stuff?
No.
Or- Okay.
No, that is a very expensive program where we have to, it's like taking a pizza cutter and slicing off a section of the concrete in order, let me explain it a little better. If you have a tree next to a sidewalk section, the tree roots migrate out, and those tree roots can push a piece of concrete up, sometimes up very high. And there's places in Littleton, literally, that it's impossible almost to walk on those sections. So what we have done in some cases is where that tree has pushed that sidewalk up just a little bit, we take this pizza cutter and we just slice off a piece of it to level it. Well, eventually the tree root's going to push it back up again.
Well, no.
But this takes care of it for several years. On the situation you're talking about, we actually have to contract a lot of that work out that you're describing. The program that I'm putting here is all done by city staff.
Okay, and what you just described is not what was done on mine. They put something like cement just to create a smoother
a
piece,
concrete patch.
But none of that is
Yeah,
what would...
we don't
yeah,
want to do much of that anymore. No.
And that would...
No.
Yeah, okay, I just want to clarify. Thank you.
Bruce?
Where, from the side of the street, where is the progression of ownership? The lot line goes out to, an individual residential lot line goes out to the street, but I know, for example, there's campaign yard signs between the sidewalk and the street that's deemed to be public right-of-way of some sort.
On a typical neighborhood, the right-of-way line between the private property and the city's right-of-way for the street is approximately 3 to 4 feet behind the sidewalk.
Okay, so the sidewalk then is technically in
Public right-of-way,
public right-of-way is an easement?
everywhere.
Yeah.
If it's not in the public right-of-way as a dedicated street on a subdivision plat, it would be in an easement
Okay.
that the city has access right to, so that at all times the sidewalk is available to the public for their use.
Okay, but at that level, it still falls into the property owner's responsibility to maintain the sidewalk, notwithstanding it's in public right-of-way?
There's a section of the city code, 8-2-2. It is hereby declared that with the exceptions contained in this chapter, it shall be the responsibility of the owner to maintain sidewalks adjacent to his property in conformance with the minimum standards set by the city.
Pretty straightforward then, huh?
I couldn't have written it better myself.
Okay then, thank you.
I'm sorry, Phil?
Yes. Kirsten, could you say a little bit more about,
Get this ahead.
when you use that phrase, shift liability, where is it?
Thank you, Jerry. Could you please explain a little further about shift liability and what you're referring to there? And that's part one. And the second part is, if actually the city crew is completing the work, what warranty to the property owner might there be?
We can cover both of those in an agreement, but mainly we are immune from liability for many things. And if we fail to maintain, we can be liable, but because we've, through the city code, shifted the maintenance to the property owner, we are immune from liability essentially. So we can get sued, but we have a absolute defense essentially.
Okay, well then also cover though the responsibility, because there's a contract between the city and the property owner for the replacement or repair, and what warranty or responsibility, because a lot of concrete work can be done well, and a lot of concrete work can be done poorly, so that it might lead to buckling and other elements. So,
Well, I think our plan is to look at our agreement and revise it so that we don't guarantee that sort of thing. I mean, it certainly could be a policy issue, but we can control that through a written agreement.
Jim?
Charlie, I think the driveway replacement has been a tremendous service to the citizens of the city. And it's something that I would like to see us be able to continue if we possibly could. Maybe we could look at something other than a 50-50 split, because right now that 50-50 pays for personnel as well as materials. Maybe if it went to the homeowner having to buy all the materials and it'd go to an 80-20 split or something like that. I just think that that's a service that we've been providing for a number of years, and I'd hate to see it go away if we could.
The 50-50 program right now, the property owner pays for all the materials, the actual concrete and the asphalt. The city then subsidizes the labor, the equipment, overhead, and of course we don't charge any profit. As a result, if you have a sidewalk section that's 10 feet long and we charge you $100, it costs us $100 to pay for the cement and the asphalt. So that's all you're paying for. So if you wanted to expand that program and say, we still want to do those driveway bumps, you would have to modify the program to say, should a property owner pay more for that? I'll tell you that under the existing program, we could not do any more work than what we're doing. We can't expand that program and take on more customers. We do about 60 to 65 customers a year. We can't do any more.
I know you've always had a limit on how many you could do, depending upon the personnel that's there. But the service that provides with car repairs to homeowners, when they hit that bump at an angle, which most people do, puts their cars out of alignment, and then that's more expensive that they got to do to maintain their cars. So the more of those we can get rid of, the better off we would be. And it's just a program I'd hate to see go away.
I think what we're really saying is that right now, I mean, our greatest need in terms of the infrastructure is dealing with the hazardous and what's falling apart, and that's with limited resources. We want to get that under control. Maybe there's some other ways through the budget process if you want to allocate some additional funds, and we contract for service for that. But the real focus here is to try, we've got aging infrastructure, and we want to focus on what's falling apart, notwithstanding the benefit. But when you have limited resources, I think we need to really fine-tune and focus on what's core and what we should be focusing on and accomplishing. And then if more money comes in, we go back, and once we fixed up the broken stuff.
Charlie's group has always come forward with a priority list of how to which sidewalks are worse in the city that need to be repaired, and that usually gets done as well. And so I guess I understand what Charlie said and understand what you said, but on the other hand, it is a tremendous service we're able to provide for the people who are paying taxes to the city, and it's just something I'd hate to see go away.
Let me make one other comment. Councilman Cernanek mentioned the warranty. We do warranty our work. We've had very, very few people come back and say, your concrete didn't work a year later. If in that first year our concrete fails, we go in and we replace that concrete. I can tell you, if we get one a year, that might be about right. Not even that this year. Nobody has called and said, last year's concrete failed, you got to come and redo it. It happens extremely rare.
Bruce?
The requirement to have accessibility at the sidewalks where they meet an intersection for people with wheelchairs or others, where does that fit into this program?
That's a good question. Two things on that. Number one is if a disabled person addresses us regarding a location that they regularly use for access, it goes to the top of our list. And secondly, there is no charge because it's usually done on a corner or what we call a radius. And we do not charge the property owner for that work because it affects the benefit of the community, and we don't charge for that. We do get those calls. Again, I would say it's rare, but we get one or two a year where a disabled person contacts us and says, the curb ramp at the corner of the street is inaccessible for me in my wheelchair. Can you do something? And we put it up high on the list, and we go do it.
Bill?
Charlie, one other item is in many neighborhoods, the driveway and where it meets the street is the sidewalk. You know, when is there a separation between when it's driveway and when it's sidewalk? Because I will tell you, most of the neighborhoods in District 3 are kind of in that point where the sidewalk runs and abuts the curb, and it goes right across the driveway.
Correct. And the sidewalk is part of the driveway. And if that section of walk is bad, even though it's part of the driveway, we would replace it for the benefit of the public to eliminate hazardous or unsafe conditions. And if it is a driveway that has what we call the Hollywood bump, Hollywood is that rollover curb, and the property owner agrees to pay the 50%, we could replace that as a part of the program with the non-Hollywood rollover bump. It would be the transition, as we call it. So if it is a poor sidewalk condition as a part of a driveway, yes, that would qualify under the program that I have proposed. And that does happen on occasion. What we don't want is people going out to their driveway with a sledgehammer and then calling us saying my sidewalk's no good.
Any other questions? Jerry?
Charlie, you had mentioned that some of the jobs you have to subcontract out?
We subcontract out the leveling that I talked about before, where a company comes in and can take a piece off the sidewalk. We do contract out, as identified in the staff report, concrete replacement as a part of street paving at no cost to the property owner. And this has been done for probably 15 or 20 years, where the city, either by our crew doing our typical residential street resurfacing or a bigger project, a complete rebuild of a street that we contract out, the property owner doesn't pay for that, and that is all subcontracted.
So as far as liability insurance-wise, with the prime subcontract and sub-tier subcontractors, who follows up on those certification or certificates to make sure they're actually covered and the city's not liable?
We do.
Who is we?
The city engineers that manage the project. We review their bonds and insurance. All of them meet the requirements. Every one of the companies we work with in Littleton is bonded and insured.
So a sub-tier then is covered by the prime?
Yes, or their own. An example, if you're going to replace your own driveway approach and you hire out a contractor, it's in the public right-of-way. So that contractor has to get a permit from the city, and we require a bond and insurance from that contractor. So in reality, we are checking the contractors for the benefit of the homeowners. Oh, yes.
And again, so that would cover any sub-tiers that they bring in contact?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Bruce?
You may have said this and I didn't catch it, but I mean, you got 35,000 in here for purchase of concrete. And so if it's half, that means this total program costs maybe $70,000 a year?
More.
100? I mean, to Jim's question, how much money are we talking about here?
But for the whole program, including labor and equipment, it's probably $85,000 to $90,000 for doing the concrete replacement program.
Plus the 35 from
No,
here?
that includes the 35. The 35, and then you double it, and I'm adding some more because in reality, we charge less than 50% of the cost of a job.
Okay, so it's $90,000, soup to nuts, and.
Yes.
So,
I'll give you the example. A driveway that is 20 feet wide, 20 feet long, I'm sorry, we charge $200 to repair and replace that driveway bump.
okay.
If you were to go out and hire a contractor to do it on your own, one that's licensed and bonded in the city,
Yeah.
anywhere between 500 and 1,000.
So they have a 100% profit margin?
Oh, I'd say more than that on projects like this.
Well, so I guess ultimately, I'm sorry. Mainly, I guess the question here is, are you guys basically saying, from a cost constraint perspective, $90,000 is something that's, you want to re-divert that whole 90 to sidewalks as opposed to come up with an incremental 90 to do both? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not sure how to address that.
How much do you need to fix the dangerous sidewalks?
Just continue the same amount of money that we have now, just redirect the emphasis away from driveways to hazardous sidewalks.
Okay, but if we wanted, theoretically, if we wanted to do both, how much money are we talking about?
A lot more, because we'd have to have staff and equipment and to do more side. Again, we can
Okay, so
only
it's
do.
a staffing issue, is that the problem?
Oh, the resources, yeah.
It's not a concrete material issue.
No.
That's what Charlie was saying earlier, that we can handle about 65 projects
Right.
a year. So, I mean, some of this, we're a little ahead of ourselves in terms of the budget, some of your questions, Bruce. I think part of this is a microcosm of that, saying with the limited resources we have, again, notwithstanding Jim's comment, if we are living in a world of limited resources, let's put that through maintaining the asset rather than enhancing the asset, because we're not maintaining it to a level that we're comfortable with. If during the budget process you want to up that, you're going to see some incremental costs, because whether it's additional staff or we contract it out, small public works contract type of thing, they're going to be taking that profit line. But we can have that conversation then as well.
No, I totally get that. I mean, that's essentially the decision point. I mean, in my mind is, I understand what you're saying, and I understand as well what you're saying, and I guess in order to make a value-based decision on the whole thing, we need to sort of understand the incremental amount of money required, or what shifting this resource, how many incremental sidewalks are we talking about given staff constraints? And so this is a pretty narrow slice. It's hard to say yes or no to this without knowing the context, I guess is what I'm saying.
Bruce and then Peggy.
The other sidewalk replacement program that you have is the one that comes through the community development block grants, and is been called the Northeast Neighborhood Sidewalk Replacement Program. Is there a juxtaposition of that with this, and also where do the homeowners then fit into that issue when you're replacing sidewalk along a block or in a major area? Are they being billed for the work?
No, the Community Development Block Grant Program funded by the federal government can only be used in low and moderate income neighborhoods. And there's only defined areas of Littleton where this occurs. It also every sidewalk that we replace has to be at least 5 feet wide, handicap accessible at all ends. And that's a requirement. The homeowner is not charged anything for that work being done. However, they must now shovel or maintain a sidewalk that's 5 feet wide, whereas some of them are currently only 2.5 feet wide. So we're doing a beneficial project for the public by replacing very narrow sidewalks that are inaccessible for many people with a 5-foot wide sidewalk. And that is only done in certain neighborhoods. But I will tell you, as long as that project or program is funded by the federal government, and we continue to get that money, we have sidewalks to be done. There's no light at the end of the tunnel on that project.
And then do we contract that, or do we use our staff?
No, that's called contracted out. And the requirements of the federal government on that are very high.
Peggy?
So Charlie, how many places would need what you're talking about, and how I'm assuming it couldn't all be done in 1 year.
It's hundreds,
Okay.
many hundreds.
So this would be a many-year project.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jerry?
So what is our purpose here? Just to talk about reallocating money?
Redirecting the program, reorienting the program toward the hazardous sidewalks as opposed to what the program is right now, which is addressing the bump.
So the money is already
Correct.
in the kitty. So now it's just a matter of, at one time, I guess council had said, this is the direction we're going to go to do this, and so we're just looking for it.
Let me explain why it comes up now, is people have been calling us for months, wanting to have their work done. We haven't taken any reservations for next year at all. For 2012, we've been totally booked up, probably back in early 2011. We have not taken anything for 2013 with the prospect that the council may wish to change the direction of the program. In order to start planning for 2013, we need to have some direction. Do you want us to go out and work on these hazardous and unsafe locations? Do you want us to continue taking the reservations for driveway approaches? Because people are calling and we need to book in for next year now. Again, we get maybe 60 to 65 locations a year. We need to start planning on what that is going to be by contacting residents who have hazardous, unsafe sidewalks that are number one on the list and say, we believe that you need to do something, and start working that program. That is not something that is done quickly. It'll take us 6 months to work all those people into the program, get them signed up, and plan out our program for 2013. I will say this also assumes that the council is going to continue the concrete replacement program that you have been doing since 1974.
So this evening, what do you want? Show of hands? We don't take formal action in here.
So then it would come to us on
Comes
a
back to
regular
us
next week.
In the budget?
No, it would come as part of the budget process.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
as Charlie just pointed out, you've got to appropriate the funds, so that's where,
Okay.
so this is just providing some early direction for it. And
Go ahead. Bruce?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess, I'm not quite sure how to, do I want you guys to focus on hazardous sidewalks? Yeah. But I guess I certainly need a little more information just in terms of, what is this redirection going to accomplish given the staff constraints? I mean, how many more sidewalks are we talking about that you're able to do with existing staff? Just
so if you just, and I'll speak for Charlie and you can correct me if I'm wrong, so if we're currently doing 65 curb rollovers, it's probably going to be less than that.
Just move staff around.
Yeah, instead of sending staff to do the curb thing, we're going to go and we're going to jackhammer out that piece of concrete, and we're going to do that. So I'm guessing it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, because pouring the curb or rollover is probably easier than taking the concrete out and replacing it. But assume it's 30 to 40 to 50.
Probably more, actually. It is pretty close.
Is it?
So I'm guessing we could do 50 to 60 per year of bad hazardous sidewalks.
See, I mean, I guess I kind of think if you got an extra 50 or 60 hazardous sidewalks out there, that should be a priority. But that doesn't mean to Jim's point, I'm not entirely sure it doesn't make sense to try and do both. But I don't know how many staff you need to do both.
Well, and that gets into, then there's a trade-off, do we want to contract it out?
Well,
Because
yeah.
I'm not sure that we want to add staff for this particular program. So that does get into the budget cycle right now. So if you're not.
Yeah, we can come up with that cost in preparation for the budget discussion and say, if you want to continue the driveway bump situation, here is what it would cost to have a contractor do the work.
And I mean, maybe offering the service makes a lot of sense, and if people want to pay for it, that's great. I'm not saying there's any, I'm not 100% sure I think it's a nice advantage. It's something we've done for years, and people, I think, enjoy it or appreciate it. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that's, something we should be doing overtly. I understand why you're doing it.
As I said early in the presentation, 90% of our work right now is those driveway bumps.
Okay, council, do we want to, with the show of hands, raise your hand if you want to move this forward with the modifications.
Modifications to,
The modifications would be that they concentrate on the sidewalks, hazardous sidewalks, and eliminate the driveway work.
okay. But can we,
Well,
Okay.
so now he knows what to do. Then on the budget season, on budget time, then I think you can bring in a line item that says, okay, if we add the sidewalk, or if we add the driveways back in, council, this is how much that's going to increase. We'll have to add budget to that at that point.
We can have that ready for you at budget discussion.
Okay, Bruce, does that settle for you?
yeah, Jim?
Jim?
It does, and I just want to add one other thing to what Bruce said. Is it possible, because you are not taking reservations for driveways right now, if you had a list of those and able to go to a cement contractor and work out some kind of deal as to, here's a list of 50 places in the city, do one right after the other and work out a deal that's financially feasible for a homeowner. Is that possible?
I'll have to look at that. Is it possible? Yes. But between now and your budget discussion, let's have the staff spend some time with the contractor and see what's involved with that. Yes, it's possible.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are moving on to the boards and commissions task force report. And we are running 20 minutes late at this point, so
Talk fast.
that's just, I'm just telling you. Just saying.
I will initiate here, and then we have three of the council members participated in this. We had Councilman Beckman, Councilman Cole, and Councilman Cernanek, as I think the rest of you are all aware. And we should, especially for Councilman Taylor, apologize that you get this document here, because we know how you feel about that. But we finalized it at our last board and commission meeting, which was last night. So, and actually we finalized it around noon today. So you are getting here, and we'll just walk you through it. It's really just the first 4 pages, 3.5 pages, and the last part is the original scope. So you can refer back to that if you like. I'm not going to go through to the mayor's timing comment. I will skip the preamble, which is the first half of the page, and get right into the task force recommendations. Task force members okay with that? Okay.
I don't know. I thought the preamble was more important than the
Well, then,
recommendations.
You can take all the time you need.
I can hear about it later if I do. Councilman Cernanek,
We'll make it up.
Well, I think at least the rest of the council should have some awareness that we did go through on a deliberative process, taking a look at what exists, which actually has some inconsistencies in it between what's being done and maybe what the code actually says in its authorization. We did go through an exercise where we actually interviewed the board chairs and the vice chairs as part of the process, so it's not something that we did just in a closed room. We were gathering that input as we came through, and in addition to that, we didn't necessarily mention it, but we also did look at code language that exists in other jurisdictions. So there was I have some comfort there was a survey of a lot of input that came from various different directions, and based on the city manager's insistence, we actually did talk with the city attorney to get her advice and counsel on what we were doing. That was the tongue-in-cheek part of the comment.
Good job, city attorney.
And then the last item I would mention is as far as taking a look at the number of members, we kind of use the magic number of 7. It's how many members we have on the council. It tends to work well when you're looking for a quorum and looking to make decisions that you get an appropriate level of continuity from meeting to meeting in that. And so that was my summary of the preamble.
Beautiful.
Michael, I'd like to add one more piece, though. We did look at the scope line by line,
Oh.
and we addressed briefly in these paragraphs that some of the items of the scope didn't address themselves ultimately to what our discussion was, and because they're so unique to each specific one or whatever, but that we did follow the scope in our work.
Questions on the preamble? Okay, so the next several pages are the specific recommendations. And as you just heard, so starting with the Fine Arts Committee currently has 11 members. And as Councilman Cernanek just stated, we thought through attrition that should come down to 7. And that was vetted through the chair and vice chair as well as the staff liaison as well. So we can just use attrition for that. You're going to see the similarities in the Fine Arts Committee, the library, and the museum. I think the group worked hard to use similar language and have a similar approach in how those three boards, which are not quasi-judicial but are truly advisory to the council, in terms of what their role was and really looking at what the council and the community could gain from having those committees out there and working in service, again, for the community and the council. We did not put red line language in here. This is the newly proposed language. You will have to go online, or we can get you a copy if you really want to see the difference of it. I don't know if you want to go line by line on these, or if you want to read them. Yes, Bruce.
Well, no, I've got a question if you want to start with that, or do you want to
Jump in.
context? You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Just on the Fine Arts Committee in particular, I think the whole resolving the issue of the working committee is great, because that's been one of their bugaboos.
Correct.
Your bullets here, though, he says serve as stewards of the Littleton art portfolio, and then review the annual budget and make recommendations. So I guess on the first one, what does that mean, serve as stewards? Because if they're not going to be out cleaning the bronzes for the sake of an argument, somebody's going to have to do that, and that's going to cost some money.
To answer what our deliberation was and our reference here, and I'll defer to Bruce and Peggy in a second as well, is that the stewards to the portfolio means what's in it, what might be able to be distributed, and taking a look at the content, not the specific items. This is not the caretaking of the items.
Okay.
It's taking a look at what's the content of the portfolio.
Okay. So does content, then who's responsible for maintenance?
City staff.
And there's going to need to be budget for that then.
Are we going to move budget that's currently on the Fine Arts Committee back to city staff? Because that was $30,000 or $10,000 a year.
They got to have something for acquisition.
Well, we gave them $10,000 a year for conservation.
Maintenance, yeah.
And then they also had an acquisition budget.
The conservation
Did have-
aspects would move.
$10,000 doesn't go very far. I mean,
But it would move back over,
Yeah.
right,
Tim is addressing the issue that you guys are discussing right now.
in the
terms of-
budget thing? Okay.
And there was a side meeting that we had with Tim, and I'm on the Fine Arts Committee, where we talked about a transition of that working committee citizens to a working committee of staff, and that would have to be the funding issue. So he understands that, and I assume that when the budget comes through, you'd see that adjustment.
You're correct.
and reviewing the proposed annual fine arts budget and making recommendations. Clarify, that's reviewing it after it's been approved by council and making recommendations on what to acquire?
No, this would be, I mean, this essentially happens now, but it's working with the director and going through. So before that budget comes forward, they have a
Okay, so
chance
it's
to
the
review it.
submission side of the
Yeah.
whole thing. Within the constraints imposed on the overall.
Yeah, so the
department.
director's putting the budget together and
So essentially
running
this
it through.
becomes part of the museum budget? Is that basically the way to interpret this?
No. No, don't make it, you don't need to make it more complicated than it is.
Want
Tim,
to, though.
I know you do.
You're succeeding.
Mission accomplished.
We will take our draft budget before it goes to you and run it through.
All right, that's fine. I'm fine.
Good, thank you.
Bad Bruce in full form.
You,
Short leash, Bruce.
as I open with these three, you're going to see that same statement, just to preclude you from asking it two more times at the bottom. So the same approach will be used.
Man's got to know his limitations.
All right, library board, I'll just let you guys, you seem very capable at reading the bullets. Last bullet does match. If there's any questions or any of the members have comments on that one? Peggy?
Yeah, I don't think we included limiting, I think we limited in the 5th bullet, act as mediator in matters involving freedom to read disputes. I think you took that out, did you?
Oh,
So it would
Yep,
stay
sorry.
freedom to read?
yep,
Thank you.
that was my error.
That's okay.
Jerry?
So for the committee, was there any discussion at all about the relationship between the library board and the museum board as far as the relationship?
Yes, and it was part of the discussion because of the decision made during that process that Mr. Nims would be director of both entities, and that there would be now opportunities to find similarities and maybe mix them, but we weren't ready as a group to see how that shook out, to say that that affected these appointed boards.
And I would say, Jerry, our expectation from our discussions is that between the library and the museum, you have the opportunity to leverage presence and possibly have expanded programs that might be shared or presented or marketed in some ways. But as far as code and what we would deal with as dictating in the code, it would be a wrong place to put that dictation in the code that they do that. That would be more an operational expectation rather than what we would put in the code.
I just think for the rest of the council, we really thought a lot about trying to merge things if it seemed to make sense. And this was where the big discussion was. We probably spent 2 full meetings really kicking this idea around and ultimately came to this point at this point in time.
I guess one of the things I'm thinking of there too is that the library board as well as the museum board, they come up with different programs which aren't that dissimilar.
Right, and something might be co-positioned or somehow get some more bang for the buck by some purpose there, and we recognized that. We did. We thought a lot about it, and in my meeting with Tim and the manager, and when we were talking about it from the fine arts point of view, and the library board point of view, we saw it as opportunities, is the way we saw it, and we just weren't there yet.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize Phil's comment that we, from a codification standpoint, as opposed to an operational approach for this, because we even talked, I think Peggy had brought up, maybe there should be a cultural committee on top of it that really was there to coordinate, and we ended up obviously thinking that with Tim being over that and some of the consolidation that he's proposing and thinking about, we can make sure that those committees do talk to each other in a greater fashion and similar ads and jointly support each other, et cetera. So.
When I was on the museum board, we had, I think Peggy, you at that time were on the library board, and we had a joint meeting where one week we had the museum board come over, or the museum board went to the library, and another week the library went over, or another month. And it was, I thought that was a great way for the two boards to get to know each other and kind of get a better idea of what each other does. So maybe if that continues, that each year they have a crossover meeting. If it germinates ideas for the two groups at that time, then they can run with it. If it doesn't, then they just got an opportunity to meet new people. Okay, next.
Museum. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything on that one from the...
Historic preservation.
All right, historic preservation. The one you guys have seen, I believe you've seen the draft code for the historic preservation. I just want to point out, in this one it is B. In a draft that had gone out, B had been completely crossed out. And in discussions with the city attorney and the mayor, and then ultimately with the board and commission task force, we put it back in and removed two words. It used to say develop and assist. Well, yeah, develop and assist, thank you. In public education programs, including but not limited to, et cetera. And what we did was we took out the develop component because that is more of a staff action at the direction of the board, and kept in the assist in public education, et cetera. And the word assist was one of those terms that the board task force, you'll see it up in the others. It was, they're assisting whatever directive that they give to staff or that council gives to them. So that's the only change from what had been previously discussed.
Does there need to be any mention, because we've been giving them money for use of grants every year, is there any need to mention anything about grant allocation in their list of duties here?
I don't think, it's elsewhere in the code if I'm correct, yeah. Yeah, all we affected, or all we were recommending was within the duties, but that's a separate section in the overall code for historic preservation.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right, the tree committee, we currently have a tree committee which goes through the full interview process with the council. We checked with Tree City USA, as it states here, and we are not required to have a council-appointed committee. So the group is not recommending that we eliminate in any way, shape, or form the tree committee, but essentially remove the requirement for going through the interview process and have staff work directly with those folks who have been involved in the tree committee and enthusiastic and excited about that, and we will continue to do it, which is what staff has essentially been doing. So we're just removing that component.
So along that line, on the committees where it's more difficult to get folks to fill the slots, such as maybe the library board, it seems like there's times there where it's a little more difficult to fill some of those slots. Is that something that you guys the committee talked about as well?
Yeah, we actually, and you're going to take our very last sentence, I think, or close to it, but that we're proposing that a study session be set up for the recruitment and review process, reappointment process for the boards and commissions. So we can talk about, if I'm understanding your question, how do we do the recruitment in a way that really draws new people in, and we can foster some interest in those boards and commissions that you need some bodies on. That answer your question?
I think somewhere in there you did answer my question.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay.
But I guess.
Yes, we'll deal with it.
Yeah, this was something that we're going to discuss at another
Yes.
time. Okay,
Yep.
that's.
Even though we don't have to have a city-appointed tree committee, we do have to have a tree committee in order
Correct.
to keep getting
Yes.
the awards. So if you don't have, is there a minimum number that you'd be looking for to keep this group going? Because some of the people who got on there now are very interested in being on the tree committee. Others we put there because we didn't have any other place else to put them, and we thought they need to.
I don't believe that there's a minimum number, but we can confirm. Yep, Charlie's shaking his head. There's not a minimum number, so.
So if you got two people, you're all right.
One might make a committee.
Michael?
We'll double check. move along.
Don't diss the tree committee.
I'm not dissing the tree committee.
Well, Jim, along that
I
line.
love the tree committee.
Along that line,
I love
too,
trees.
What about the term limits for the tree committee, too? Because we have someone who is passionate. It is a committee that's perhaps hard to fill.
If it's no longer council appointed, you don't have to worry about that.
Yep, correct. All right, the Victim Assistance Compensation Board.
And on the other side,
I'm sorry.
the membership is then thus not limited by the
Right.
council either.
Yes.
So more folks can be involved.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
And-
you can do it on short notice, which is part of what
Yep.
our issue was.
Right.
Yep. So staff can work with a variety of people who are interested in planting trees and other tree-related activities. I'm a fan of trees. Victim Assistance Compensation Board, similar recommendation that this becomes a staff committee. We currently have 3 very interested citizens who participate on a regular basis, and we're just saying that this will move to the victim assistant, victim advocate, staff person, and work with the court supervisor and ensure that those people continue, and if any of them step down, somebody else comes in. And just to remind the council about what this program is, this is a reimbursement program that was, I think, created through the state, and we have a maximum of $100 that can be reimbursed for somebody who their car gets vandalized or some other thing happens and they have a deductible on something. They can apply for up to $100 for this. And so the meeting typically is the list of folks who have made those reimbursement requests, running through it, and then approving the allocation for the $100 for those who have done it. And the 3 folks are very committed right now.
So then that $100 comes from where?
Fines,
Yeah, I want to say it comes out of the
surcharge on certain types of fines
Within the
through the
city?
courts.
Yes.
Yeah, through the municipal court.
But I don't think they have to ask for reimbursement, I think.
They do,
Do
they have
they?
to apply for it.
Well, how is it people got something without asking? Because I remember someone telling us, or me, they were totally surprised to receive anything, that they didn't.
Bruce?
Just the process is that Linda Suttle, as the victim advocate, looks for the folks that would be potentials for this, and sometimes on their behalf, she'll apply. You know, if they're uncooperative, they're hard to get a hold of, or whatever the reason would be, she doesn't want that to be the reason why they weren't given at least the opportunity. And so she follows up, and that's how that would happen. But they're all given that opportunity to apply by the victim advocate.
Contacts them.
Yeah.
I was contacted.
I was contacted.
But this then would remove term limits off of this committee.
Correct.
That's good.
Okay, going to jump way down. Election Commission, we looked at it. No changes to it, although I know I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that one of the issues that I think Councilman Cernanek brought up was the timing of those district boundaries as it relates to the current code language that's in there. And so one of the requests, as it ties into the 10-year census, is that the election committee look at the boundaries on the 3rd year, the 6th year, and then immediately, as it states here, after the census, to try to address and ensure that the timing coincides with that census. And I don't remember the exact language right now, but I think it says at a minimum of 2 years, something like that. I'm looking at you, Phil, if you remember what it currently says.
It says at least every 4th year.
4th year, okay.
Which means if you went every 4th year,
You're missing the census.
the decennial census report, which tends to come out in the years.
So that would essentially be a direction from the council to the election commission on how on their operational piece, but no code change in that one. Board of Adjustment, no action. Riverfront Authority, no action. Licensing Authority, you guys just amended those recently. Planning Commission is similar. Then the titles of the boards and commissions, and I'd like Councilman Beckman, if you want to, you did yeoman's work initially on this, and so if you want to walk them through that.
Well, we started off wondering why we called things what we call them, and we found that there's, in a few cases, there are state law wording that we have to incorporate in the title of the entity, which are the authorities. State mandated boards such as Licensing Authority and Riverfront Authority, that just derives out of the CRS. The next two words that we found were commission and board, and we felt that it was appropriate to have the definition of a commission to be something that is mandated by the charter, such as the election commission. So it's directed to all city fathers to have it through the charter. And then you come to board, which is the council. And the council appoints groups such as the Planning Board, Historical Preservation Board, and the others that are listed there because it was a council appointed, and it can be or not be based on a council decision. Then the next two, we're trying to fit into the regionalization issues. What are the areas around us using? What are their terms? And it seems as though these terms will fit. A working group, which is something we've become pretty comfortable with, the South Platte Working Group, Highline Canal Working Group, and some others. That's a city council appointed group. It includes representatives from outside the city, such as anything regional. And then task force. Task force is something which is a very temporary group of people put together to do a very specific purpose, and implicit in that is that there's a time period and a go-away time. It actually goes away at a certain time, it sunsets. So these were the terms that we came up with, and we stayed away from, in these discussions, saying advisory or quasi-judicial, because initially those were two other differentiations that we thought might play into this, but once we looked at it, we found that it really confuses the issue, and better to stick with these.
Not with what he just said, but an entirely different subject. What about the Housing Authority? Because it's not in here at all. And we appoint those members as well.
I think we found that the Housing Authority title has to stay because of a federal requirement.
That's right. I understand
They
that.
can do business as something else, which they're doing.
That's right.
So we're stuck with.
But you didn't address any of their duties or functions or anything like that in your task force report.
No.
And that's because your role within the Housing Authority is now limited to the appointment of the board members. So that is,
okay.
That's it.
What do you mean now limited? Was it?
Well, is limited, sorry.
I listened.
But yes, you do.
I was going to go there too. So the planning board, that was the planning commission. Mm-hmm. So now it is the planning board if we choose to do this. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
I believe that was the only.
Only one that
Change.
Was that the only one?
Well, it's Fine Arts Board too, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's not a commission.
It's not committee.
There you go. There's the.
So we have no other authorities.
Just those three, with the Housing Authority being the third.
Riverfront Authority, yeah.
And
Well,
licensing
authority's not
authority.
defined in here. Well, yeah, one was, there's top one.
It's ordinance. You back on? Mm-hmm. All right. Moving on to liaisons. We spent a lot of time talking about the pros and cons of having individual council liaisons. And ultimately, we thought in Phil's term that he used during the protocols, evenness of information. And if you really think about having a board or commission or a commission, board, working group, task force, or authority, rather than having the connection between just one council member and that board, the recommendation from the board task force is really to elevate that level of conversation and have it in a joint study session between whichever board that is and the full council, so that all 7 members of each board have an opportunity to interact with each other and hear how that conversation is occurring. And we will, what we're proposing is that we schedule on an annual basis study sessions with all of your boards and commissions. And obviously, it's your agenda. You can schedule it however often you need to or not need to. I would say that the majority of them you probably don't need to meet with on a regular basis, but planning commission, licensing you might want to, fine arts museum and library are another ones that you probably want to meet with on a fairly regular basis. Make sure that everyone's in alignment. And so it really came down to that evenness of information, and we felt like having that group, whichever group it is, meet with the full council, just raise the value of that conversation. And so rather than trying to hold a particular council member responsible for maintaining that line of communication, this was the recommendation, is to eliminate all liaisons. And part of that was it addresses the quasi-judicial, non-quasi-judicial boards that have both within it, which was part of the challenges we've been struggling with right now. Jim, you?
Jim?
The only word I quibble with in that is at least twice a year. I'd rather see that at least once a year, because we really have 12 boards that we operate under. And if you try to do that twice a year, and I understand it says or.
Yes, that's what I was going to point out, because I agree with you.
So, but having the ability to meet with them at least once a year, I think is great. But at least twice a year, that puts maybe more meetings that we want to have.
And it really might only be something like the planning commission that you want to have.
But that's not what
ongoing.
this says, if you read it literally.
Yeah, I read it as two or
Required.
more.
Required.
Is that how you were thinking?
That's the way I read it, is required.
I use the or as an out.
Our discussion was not to make it two or more. I will clarify that.
Yes.
And so this is, as well, not something to be codified, but an operational guide. This is going in a direction that's different than where we've been. It gives us an opportunity to do this, but one of the things that it does accomplish is it says sometimes it has some fun to it to have ad hoc contact and somewhat lobbying, but it leads to an unevenness in trying to get some things done. And what it allows for is when it's a scheduled study session, both the board and or commission can bring agenda items to the council, as well as the council addressing items. And so it allows for that joint agenda development, which in the absence of this, and where we've been, there's nothing on a board agenda, there's nothing on the council agenda that would say, let's grapple with the issue. And so it allows for that. And so that elevation so that it's board to board is what we're looking for.
So to Jim's question, how did we resolve that?
I'm good with one. I was relying on our grammar expert over here that the word or allowed us an out, but.
Yeah, I thought it did, but if
we can do one.
To avoid ambiguity, if other people are thinking that, then shift it to once and then put and on an as-needed basis, as requested.
I would still leave it for an or. I mean, I would give the flexibility to the council, because you may not want to meet with your Board of Adjustment.
At all? Oh, okay.
Or election
Digit
commission.
one or as.
Yeah, or as needed. But, because each council is going to decide who and how often anyway, so. We also, and this gets, I'm sorry, Bruce.
Quick question. My recollection was the Fine Arts Board had a charter and bylaws. I'm not entirely sure every board has a charter and bylaws, but are those, sounds like you guys have considered that. Maybe they all do. Do they all need to be modified at some point? So I assume
Yes.
somebody in the city attorney's office is going to get to deal with that.
Yes, probably.
That's
Yeah.
a wonderful opportunity
It's career
to
enhancing.
address that.
Yeah.
Some of them have protocols, some of them have guidelines.
Yeah.
There's a whole, another set of documents that.
Documents. Yeah, okay.
Right, the way we wrote your legislative rules is that they would control all boards where there was any conflict, and we still do need to go back, and I've talked to each staff liaison to pull what's there and fix it if it's necessary.
But if we go back to the question about how often, I think we just strike, they will meet with council in a study session on an as-needed basis. That then takes care of it. as requested by us or them, right?
Got it?
Our expectation is that with most boards, we'd meet. I understand, building boards of appeals or election commission might be an exception, but I'd want them to feel that they're going to have at least an audience and interchange between the board and the council. And so I guess I would love to have something in there that gives them the expectation, because it certainly is mine, and I thought of our task force is that Historic Preservation, Planning Commission, Library, Museum, Fine Arts, we'd be meeting at least once a year.
Once a year or as needed?
I mean, I don't know what that means if you say the or, then it sounds to me maybe better to put in there, council, looks forward or welcomes or does something or other, whatever we want, to meeting with each, at least once a year. And if they met with us, the ones that you just mentioned, they could come and meet. They could be invited to come and meet, and if they had no issue, they could just say, like the Board of Adjustment, we're fine, we don't need to meet. Either we do want to have that welcoming at least once a year, or it's just totally at their request or ours.
It would seem to me that unless there's something that we need to have a conversation with them about, to meet would be unnecessary. I mean, if we bring these guys in because we want to meet with them, it's an extra night for them. And unless we have a reason to meet with them, I don't know that it would be a productive meeting. I mean, it
Bill's
seems to
talking
me
about
that
the messaging on this, right? I mean, that's what Phil's discussing. The council will make their own decision.
One of the things that we're not taking you through all of the discussion is to let you know that more than one of our boards and committees and commissions commented on having a liaison was something that was very valuable. And not having a liaison, for some of the folks, they felt they had a lesser status. And, all of these are citizens that are involved and are spending time on our behalf. This is something that the council has delegated. And I'd like to, there may be some situations like the Election Commission may not even get together for a year. So there may be some instances, but I'd want them to feel like they have the opportunity to get a board-to-board session at least once a year. And because we're not looking to take something away, we're looking to elevate something so that it's there. And so
I think it does say that they can meet with you either by their request or our request on an as-needed. I don't know that we have to put a number in there. I don't know that that makes it less inviting. Bruce?
We do, with the boards and commissions recognition, meet with them once a year, if we call that the one time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
We might also consider inviting representatives from each board to a breakfast where we have them all together, and at that point be encouraging them when they have anything they want to talk to us about that's going to take more time, that they please do it. So there's more than one way to make them feel that they have access to us.
I would recommend we use on an as-needed basis. I fully agree with what Phil is communicating, but with all respect, it's been about 5 minutes over something that the council will make an individual decision every year based upon the issues that are presented to you. The recommendation here is that if there's a need for a conversation with a board or committee, that occur in a open, full, all 7 members of each. I mean, that's what the core recommendation here is. You guys could bring in your planning commission every single council member of that, or every single council meeting if that's what you felt. It will be up, regardless of what you put here, it's going to be up to every council to make that determination. So I think if you are good with the core recommendation here, which is to eliminate liaisons, because the same thing is true between the boards and commissions. They can choose to meet with each other, and eliminating any that may or may not have liaisons between them, HPB, Planning Commission, if those groups need to get together, they can have that same thing. So that's,
I'm fine.
if that's good. Phil, you can live with that?
Jerry?
I think a couple things here. One, if we need to have meetings so that they can feel good, then I think something's wrong anyway. I mean, we should be having meetings that are for a purpose, that are productive for everybody, not just to make somebody feel better. I think also, too, some of these boards only meet 2-3 times a year. So, and it just isn't necessary that we have to meet with everybody all the time unless there's a need that they really want to. So I can see not doing this with everybody all the time.
All right. New board and commission. So the committee discussed, or the task force discussed 3 potential new committees, and there was a fair amount of vetting that occurred. Go ahead, Phil.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Distracting, stay still.
that occurred before. And those 3 were looking at senior needs, youth, and economic development. So the first one in here that the board is recommending is that at a directive from the council that staff look at what funding needs we might need in order to put a task force together. And so remember, as Bruce defined what a task force was, is a short, time-sensitive, direct focus group of individuals. And they would be tasked with reviewing the needs, value, and goals and objectives of what that task force might accomplish. And it's really a question in the senior world of what are the needs within the senior population, and it might ultimately shift into more of a working group, which is that regional approach, because as you all know, the role of municipal government in service delivery and social services tends to be smaller rather than larger, and the county may hold some of those. And there's also a lot of service providers in the nonprofit and the for-profit world that live live outside the city of Littleton boundaries. And so what the recommendation here is to put a smaller group together to go and evaluate that and then come back to the council.
And I'll just add, in dealing with the senior issues, there's also the demographic movement and questions that might come up as to what we may need to do with not necessarily our social services, but it may have implications on code and zoning.
Comment?
Jerry?
So the economic committee, whatever we'd call it here, that's in a sense, it's not replacing BAC in any way, shape, or form, but it's bringing in the business folks. And did you have a chance to talk about what size or what?
We're not recommending doing anything on economic development because the council is currently you're somewhere in the 9-month or you're in your education phase. And so as a part of what we had discussed, we are bringing some folks together, and I have the list somewhere, but we're undertaking an existing process, and so at the outcome of that process, you may want to put something together, but it felt like it was premature to make that recommendation as you go through that. On the youth one, similar to the senior, is that the task force is recommending that staff at council direction request funding to allow for the appointment of a youth board for education and leadership in municipal government. There is a need, I think, for the council to have a study session on exactly what you're trying to accomplish with the youth. What is it that you want to see happen? Is it about getting families involved in local government? Is it about having another avenue for families to feel like Littleton is a place to move? Is it to address kids within the school district that are interested in civics? What is it? And then ultimately, you may have a different vehicle or method by which you want to accomplish that particular goal. But for our purposes, we put it in here as a youth board, that we would put some dollars in the 2013 budget, and then somewhere along the way allow you to have a study session on it to discuss exactly what you want to accomplish. Gary?
Now, currently, we have the youth initiative,
Correct.
so this would be different than that?
Correct. Yep. So the youth initiative is essentially one portion of a staff person who is out, and the way I describe it is connecting dots with service providers that deal with youth issues in Littleton and ultimately beyond. This is really getting into the schools and figuring out how you may have seen at CML they had some presentation on different communities with youth boards. And so it's really trying to figure out how do you want to engage, or if you want to engage with youth in local government here. So bringing more about us and getting people involved with us.
Then along that line with the youth initiative, say the Friends of the Museum or the Friends of the Library, how does that all play a role in any of this kind of stuff?
I don't know that it necessarily overlaps. There may be, out of that conversation, you may say that especially in the Friends of the Library, which has a fairly healthy children's program, you might want to tie something in there, but I don't know that there's anything else off the cuff.
Well, I think within the board, the library and the museum boards, you guys talked about each board making recommendations regarding use of gifts, for example, and the Friends give each entity a chunk of money every year. I kind of assumed that was the tie-in there, that the boards would look at figuring out what to do with the money and recommend stuff vis-a-vis what Tim Nims is looking for in terms of programs and so forth and so on.
So on the museum, Friends of the Museum, they collect funds. But are the Friends determine where it goes, or is it the museum?
The museum and the library, it's single organ, it's Friends of the Library and Museum, it's one entity. But traditionally, the directors of each entity, Bemis and the museum, which is now just Tim Nims, have come in and said, hey, we've got a need for something, piece of equipment or funding. Usually it's more capital in nature. And then they'll ask the Friends who give, like I say, they give each entity, I forget what the number is, $40,000 or $50,000 a year. Maybe it's to provide a piece of equipment for someone who's got sight impairment at the library or some such thing.
So the Friends agree with the director's recommendation?
Yeah,
but the board has no play.
Well, up until now, but I think that was
No, that's not so. When I was liaison to the library board,
the board did.
the board, the director brought suggestions,
Okay.
and the board gave feedback on that.
Okay, so there you go. So maybe that was the start of the process, was coming up with the projects that then the director would go to the Friends and ask, as part of the annual allotment, here's what we'd like to use the money for.
But in that case, ultimately, it's the Friends then who made the decision whether that went to the library for what the library board thought they could use it for.
Yeah, that's right.
You're right?
That's and they're a separate 501c3.
Right, yeah, but they gather their own money. They do what they want with that.
Totally, yeah, and they do that through craft fair.
So the Littleton Initiative then, is a youth initiative, is that
No, that's Greater Littleton.
That's Greater Littleton Youth Initiative.
the youth initiative?
That's Greater Littleton Youth Initiative, isn't that what it is?
That's an LPS. That's mainly LPS with outreach to other people, isn't it?
Well, and I think it's $100,000 out of our budget.
Yeah, we fund.
So
Are
it's
we
mainly us.
duplicating something? Or?
Yeah.
No.
I think the youth board is more an intention of involving youth in the role of the city government. So it would be some sort of it'd be like the younger mirror of a senior committee. So you'd have the senior committee working on senior issues, you'd have the youth committee working on youth issues.
So, okay.
That's my simplified
Gotcha.
Very good.
explanation.
You did it very clearly.
Thank you, Jerry.
Michael would still be talking and convincing me what it is.
Indeed, okay, come on, let's go, Michael.
All right. The review of process for appointment, this is for Jerry's edification, I'll say it quickly, I already said this. This is that we will come back and schedule a study session so the council can discuss the recruitment and appointment process in advance of being in it, because I know there were some last-minute changes this year, so we'll be a little proactive on it. And then to Councilman Beckman's comment that we did go all through the scope, and there was some items that ultimately we did not feel like were really tied to looking at the existing boards, commissions, really didn't fit in there. One of the ones that I thought would be worth talking about, at least quickly, are the other boards and commissions that people are participating in. So we did not address the
LPS.
no, the
Fire.
no, stop.
Sounds like.
Get there. Hold on. Urban drainage, Dr. Cog, those things, because those are council decisions on the appointments for those. That's not, we didn't feel like you needed to change anything on that because each council will actually appoint those. And on the ones with that folks just want to participate in, you will just, because of personal or professional interest, you will just go and participate in. And we didn't think that we needed to discuss it or write anything down any greater than that. You just go and bring back information as you feel is appropriate, but you're going because you have that personal or professional interest in that. And those are our recommendations. So the next steps would be that we would work with the attorney's office to do the code changes in those duties and responsibilities. And obviously, as someone had brought up, there's associated protocols within the boards and commissions that would need to be amended as well. So if the council's comfortable with that and you give us a head nod, we will start that next process.
Yeah, I would also suggest that we formulate a letter which has a summary of the big pieces that then is mailed to every board and commission member so that they're aware of what's going on and what's happening to their board or commission and explains things a bit to them.
We can work with the existing if you want to. Okay, fantastic.
Okay, council, 5-minute break, and we'll return and finish our agenda.
What's the name of that landscape?
Okay, quorum's at the table.
Okay, good. We're ready. So the next order of business is the list of items that council has suggested, and what the intent here is that we will quickly hit through each of these. I've given a minute limit. That is a not to exceed, not a we expect you to go to limit. And because what we want to do is, there's an awful lot of issues on here, and a number of them are, and they're all contributed by council. And so what we want to do is put them somewhere. So they're either going to go to a study session, and that probably includes staff, going to staff for preparing for that, or they will go to a regular meeting, bypass the study session, we're ready to hear it in a regular meeting, or they will be killed. They'll just go away. We're not going to deal with anything. Doesn't mean they die forever, just means that we're not going to move them forward in our lifetimes. So
Till the sun burns.
yes. So what I've also noted on these is that there is a council member's name or more than one council member's name, and that's who had listed it on their list of things they would be interested in bringing up. So as we go through, I would ask each of you, as your name appears on each one, to just give a brief piece of information as to why this was important for you to have on here. And then if there needs to be, we've got time in here for discussion on these. I kind of noted some of them could probably go faster than others. And then we'll make a quick decision as to where we want to take them. So we'll start actually with, we're going to jump on the agenda a little down to Economic Development Symposium Think Tank, because our Community Development Director is anxious to start his vacation, and he has generously been sitting here patiently waiting for us to get to this 10-minute item. No, excuse me, this is a 5-minute item.
No, you're on community.
I'm on the wrong one. Where am I? Oh, 10-minute. Okay, ready, get set, go.
Thank you, Mayor. This is like vacation for me, so.
Take your vacation at the
Us
office.
too.
That's the way to go.
That is so
It's
sad.
much easier, less travel.
Less stress.
Okay, I think you wanted to have an update on Inspire Littleton, our process for updating the comprehensive plan. And I thought maybe I'd start out and talk a little bit about the online forum, our Mind Mixer site. That went up May 1st. It went live. We've got, as of today, we have a total of 196 people signed up. Now, to be honest, 149 of them are confirmed Littleton residents that are participating in the discussion items. If we look at ages, we're pretty close to what our demographic was. So we're averaging about a pretty good, close to a 50-50 split male-female, and our average age is 45.5 years old. So I think the census showed us an average age of 42. Now, one of the things that the Inspire Littleton folks or the Mind Mixer folks told us is expect to see a younger demographic because the younger folks tend to do things online, and they appreciate these kind of things. And the way the Mind Mixer site's set up, that you gain points as you participate, and you turn that in for prizes. So it's like a video game, and the idea was we'd get a younger demographic. Well, that hasn't proven true in Littleton, so we're pretty close to where our census numbers are. I think when I started off and told you at the beginning of the process that we'd kind of spend the summer just being a sponge and soaking up ideas and really trying to get a brainstorm conversation going. And then once we get into the fall, we start crafting, kind of compiling those comments we get into some major ideas and start drafting goals and objectives, working with our planning commission. And then I think we'll use that Mind Mixer site again to kind of get some feedback on what those ideas are. At the same time, we're doing the forums, as you know, after your meetings in the park. We've had 2 so far. We haven't had the greatest participation that we hoped to have. Trail Mark was the first one. I think we were hindered there by the actual site for our comprehensive plan meeting was quite a ways away, so I'm going to blame the fact that nobody was able to find their way from the park to the daycare center. We did get 2 folks, the very nice folks. They were from Columbine, unfortunately, but they gave us good input. The last one, we had a bigger number. We had a dozen people showed up, and we went through kind of a good presentation. And in those meetings, we're using that process where you had the clickers. So we're asking questions, and people are responding. And I think that was a good presentation. We started out being very broad and just asked, what do you love about Littleton? When we got to that last meeting, and in fact, if you'll notice some of the questions we're bringing up on Mind Mixer now, we're kind of narrowing the focus a little bit. And our presentation at the last meeting, which I forget what the school was, I guess that was Powell Middle School. We talked about the trends from 1980 to today based on census data, because 1981 was kind of the date of our original comprehensive plan that we're changing, and start showing the changes in the population, how we've seen the population in the last 10 years level off. The population has gotten older. You can really follow the bubble of the baby boomers moving through Littleton. So that's the good thing is people are staying here. They're aging in place. And then we showed some of the housing and how the housing has been built in the city, and then the reinvestment in that housing. So one of the things that we pointed out that we also put up on the Mind Mixer site just yesterday is how the major investments going back in the neighborhoods are in the newer neighborhoods. And I guess that makes sense from an income standpoint, but I think it kind of shows a trend that how do we spur reinvestment in some of the older neighborhoods in Littleton. So that's been the process so far. I think at our next meeting, we are planning to talk about some of the commercial and the job trends. I've just started to look at some of that data, and what I find interesting is we actually are importing people. More people are coming into Littleton to work than going out. But the fact, the number for the people who actually live here and work here is very low. And I think in one way, and I know the city managers talked about this, I think part of that has to do with places to live and new housing in the community. So even though economic development, you don't normally think of housing, I think they are linked. That's it in a nutshell. If there's any specific questions or trends, we have been meeting with the Planning Commission. I talked to our project manager that what we told them, the Planning Commission early on, is we would bring questions to them, preview them before we get them up on the website, and that's what we're going to start doing more of. So the plan.
We'll talk about next steps as well.
Yes, next steps. Okay. One of the things we are planning is we're kind of thinking 3 tracks, if you will, of how we look at the comprehensive plan. One is just kind of the conversation that we use the Mind Mixer site for. We're presenting some more technical data in the public meetings. And then there's a tactile part, is how people kind of get involved and enjoy planning, if you will. And so we are planning a process that's going to be much more interactive as far as land use planning. We're thinking of using that August date to do that and then bring it back. The final meeting is right here in the council chambers, and actually perhaps have a mock planning commission meeting where folks get to kind of get out of their role of a citizen and sit as a planning commission and look at some of the prepared plans for by the various groups. So it's a work in progress, and we'll give you a little bit more details as we get there. Then when we get into the fall, I see us kind of compiling some of the information, some of the brainstorming information, and again, start drafting the plan and putting items out on Mind Mixer and see how the community relates to them. We're hoping, again, I'm still kind of holding tight to what we propose as a time frame. I hope by the new year we'll have a plan that we have a lot of consensus from the community on, and that we can start having hearings with our Planning Commission and City Council. At this point, I kind of really envision the comprehensive plan. Again, it was supposed to be kind of the umbrella document, so I see it being very high level with a few graphics, but not to the point where we have a detailed land use plan. And then we'll probably identify areas, because we have been getting input that there are important corridors in the community that perhaps we need to drill down on, and at a much higher level of detail, like traffic engineering, landscape architecture, all those sorts of things. So I think when we get to a final comprehensive plan, we'll probably point at areas that need additional attention, and then we'll just continue rolling through those. Any questions I could answer for you, Mayor and Council?
Jim?
Well, I could tell that not only is council going to have difficulty, but staff will, between the difference of planning board and planning commission.
Yeah, that was a shock.
Yeah.
So I'll have to tell planning board.
Because you use planning commission at least twice or 3 times.
Stuck in my head, yes.
One of the ways I think in which you can spur investment in older neighborhoods is having some sort of a grant or loan program like the Housing Authority has, but the Housing Authority is limited only to certain neighborhoods that they can invest in. And if we're able to create some sort of a revolving fund budget to give loans out, to do some upgrades, additions to housings, do accessory dwelling units, do granny flats, do build-ons for people to move into or out of. Something like that in the older neighborhoods would help bring those up, I think, to a higher level, and give us a lot of upgrades and spur some redevelopment that would occur. But that, again, is a budget consideration that we don't have a lot of funds that we could ever come forth with that. That's why it probably had to be some sort of revolving fund to do it.
Right. Yeah, you talked a little bit earlier about community development block grants, but they are very limited to certain neighborhoods. They have to be a low, moderate neighborhood. But there's other nonprofits out there. I'm familiar with Neighborhood Housing Services, and they provide very low interest housing improvement loans. I'm not sure if they're active in Colorado. but I'm sure there's other organizations like that. And they really structure a loan to fit whosever income it is. So there might be opportunities. Now, one thing we are proposing just from a code compliance standpoint is a very small fund that would be just to be able to take care of a code issue that we see out there rather than getting wrapped up in a lot of different homeowners, or is it in the right-of-way, is it not in the right-of-way, and so we can take care of some blighting issues that are out there. And the example that kind of hit me is somebody dumps a couch in the street, and then we get in an argument of whether it's in the right-of-way and who put it there and who are we going to go after to pick it up. Meanwhile, it sits out there for 16 days and it doesn't do anybody any good. So, I mean, you're right. There are other ways we can start reinvesting in those neighborhoods.
Bill?
Glenn, and this is a question of whether at least in your mind, does it end up in some of the comprehensive plan discussion, which is some of where our aggregate land use goes dictates, the blend between commercial versus residential versus park, and that also relates to what's a sustaining economic model for the city going forward. Do you see at some point in time that the comprehensive plan will at least pay some attention to our mix of overall land presence and how that's being used in the context of what's going to be needed to have an economic sustaining municipality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually that's kind of the question that I'm thinking about our community activity is one of the things we're seeing in Mind Mixer is a lot of wishes. We need more trails, we need more sidewalks. You heard Charlie talk about the expensive sidewalks, but if you really want a walkable community, you need sidewalks, and they're expensive. So all those things have a price tag. From our budget standpoint, retail drives that. One of the things we want to talk about at the next meeting is where are those performing retail areas, where are they not? And the other thing I'd like to look at is what is zoned, what is built, and are we overzoned or underbuilt in the retail? So that we can have some recommendations as far as if you get a case before you where somebody wants to change retail to multifamily, let's say. That's not an unusual request. Mm-hmm. Are we overzoned in that particular land use where maybe adding some population around the existing centers could help create more of a market for that area? So I guess that's a long-winded question, but I know what you're saying is what's the capacity for the city as far as the employment, residential, commercial?
Yeah, I will tell you that in the TBD Colorado discussions, the first two sessions had a lot of wishes and desires and hope fors and dreams. When the third session said, okay, now you have to balance it in a cost model and recognizing there's limits in what you can do on the revenue side, that actually changed dramatically what folks were willing to put on the agenda as priorities.
Right, and actually the Mind Mixer has a way of attaching dollar symbols to wishes, I guess, to kind of put that reality back in. And so we'll investigate that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great vacation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will go back to the top of the agenda list. Budget update, philosophy, economic forecast. We all had this as an area of interest, so City Manager Penny will do a 5-minute presentation.
That's it.
All right, talking fast. We are starting the budget process, and all right, he does. Will you give me like a 1-minute warning? Debate club.
4 minutes.
So revenues are up right now. You guys know that. We're projecting right now this is budget numbers, about a 3% increase for the 2013 budget over the 2012 budget right now. Finance is still continuing to look. You guys know it's July. We're still fine-tuning it. I thought I'd talk more about how we're developing the budget and how we're going to bring it forward to you. So what I've asked for all the departments to provide are 2 different budgets. What is the baseline budget? What do you need to do? Keep everything going the way that it is. And then primarily because we've been in a recession for many years, and people have been, I think over the last many years, their first thought whenever anything comes up is we can't afford it. So what I've asked for is a second budget that is, in order to be a high-performing program, ultimately organization, what is it that you would put in there? What's the right number in there for you to be successful in whatever program you happen to be dealing with? And I've asked the supervisors and department heads and whatever hierarchy level that is in there not to make a judgment call on whether those are appropriate numbers or not, but allow that to filter up to the executive team so that we can talk more comprehensively about all the needs within the organization. Because what appears to be happening or have happened in the past is the trade-off conversations occur within the department, and they don't occur within the organization. And so if there are a variety of needs within Public Works, as an example, and say there is a 5% increase that was allowed, that 5% is what's proposed. It's already had the trade-off by the time it reaches the executive team, or at that point it was called the Budget Committee. I think that it's important to have those conversations on the citywide basis because there might be a trade-off between what's occurring in the request within the police department and the request that's coming from Public Works or anywhere else. And it seems to me that that conversation needs to occur at that level. It's also important because it hasn't happened in the past, similar to how you guys go through the budget, is for all the department heads to hear what all the varying needs are. Because I believe that it's important for the Public Works Director to fully grasp what the Chief of Police is asking for and why those requests are being made and vice versa, and all that cross-section. So we're going to be meeting, and I believe the City Attorney will be joining us as well, to go through the entire budget. She may get bored at some point, but really so that we all can understand it. And then when it comes to you, you can be assured that it was vetted at that level with all of those programs coming to the forefront. And when we're bringing that budget forward to you with whatever those final recommendation finance numbers are for revenues, we have vetted it at that level, and it hasn't been squashed early on because, as you were discussing earlier on the sidewalks, putting more money into sidewalks means we don't have as much money for capital needs at the library or whatever those are. And so it's important to package all that together. And then the actual budget, when it comes before you, and I've said this probably several times, will come at a policy level question. And kind of this, since I'm probably down to about a minute and a half, the simplest example would be, does council support the following street capital repair program? $1 million from these budget line items, and here are the 10 projects at $100,000 each. And you can go through those projects and know that we've prioritized those particular ones, but you can then make the trade-off between that and maybe a request for self-checkout equipment at the library as a trade-off, and maybe you take out a street program and take that $100,000 and move it over there. But you will see individual policy questions by department with a definition of what it is, what fund it's coming out of, and we'll have a little bit right now, because you do have goals and objectives, of how it ties back to existing council-adopted plans that will grow over time as we have comp plans and some sub-area plans and all. And we are just starting that process. The department heads are making their requests into HR for FTEs and filling out the spreadsheets right now. And so we'll keep you updated as we go along for it. That was probably just under 5 minutes.
You're about right on.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Okay, good. Okay, museum admission charge. Peggy?
I got this because I requested to have it added to the agenda when we had a shortened agenda, and I thought we'd have actual discussion. This originates from a request before last week that was mentioned at regular council meeting last week. 2 council members had inquired about fees at the museum, why we do or don't have fees. Well, we don't have them, but what's that about? And the director of the museum and library said that a study had been done several years ago, and he would send it to those council people, and I requested that we all receive it. So we did. So now we need to know how to proceed.
I guess the action here is there enough interest on council to pursue? I would believe either, if we want to try to do something, either take it to a study session and have more vetting out on it, or is council ready to, do we think it's something that could go to a regular meeting and happen there regarding whether or not we want to consider charging? I think that's the bottom line on this one. Do we want to consider it? And Jerry first and then Jim.
Yeah, I brought this up last week, and what it was, I just wanted to know what the city policy was, and that's what you did. You provided me. I think Tim did a good report to me. In my eyes, it's something that we can wait till budget season to really look at it, to see what the financial impact are. I don't see doing something immediately. That's for doggone sure, but I'd want to see the budget and all that good stuff. I was just requesting information. That's what I was doing. I wasn't intending on suggesting anything. I just wanted to see what the policy was.
Okay. Jim?
Kind of in reply to what Jerry, I think, was just asking, I think that what the staff needs is know what direction to move in order to get ready for the budget session. And my vote is going to be number 3. It's going to be to do nothing and keep the status quo.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments? Jerry?
But yeah, I'm not too sure I want to do nothing. When I read his report, I see a lot of holes in it. So I would like to discuss it at some point, but I'm thinking maybe before budget time.
Well, all we have to do is decide to move it to a study session, and then Michael will be keeping a list of those things, and then we'll apply dates to them.
Okay, put it as a short study session then.
Okay, well, let's find out if that's what everybody wants to do. Jim?
I want to keep the status quo.
Phil?
Absent some motivation from staff, status quo is fine.
No, Jerry wants a study session. Bruce?
Yeah, I kind of think we maybe have bigger fish to fry. I'd probably leave status quo.
Bruce?
Status quo, but I think the issue that we're seeing is that there may be ways to think out of the box to find funding for library activities, but in terms of the admission and the things of the narrow scope of that, status quo.
You mean museum?
For the museum, museum, yeah, and I was thinking about museum and library, so I have them both on my mind.
Yes, I agree with good Bruce. But I think it might be appropriate at least to give questions about the report to Tim, because I had several questions, about it. So you said you saw some holes, so I think could do both without necessarily doing anything more than to kind of.
If the council's not desiring of charging for fees, I don't know that it would be valuable to have the staff work on redoing the report or filling holes until the council. Because if you delay this a year or two or however long, we would redo the report by the time you did it, and we can make sure that, whatever council is seated then, that we respond appropriately at that point.
Well, if we have questions, can we get them? There were several questions I had just to enlighten myself.
If I have questions, I'll run mine to the city manager. But at this point, I don't really have anything burning.
I mean, like anything, you can shoot me an email, and if it's a quick response, but it sounds like council's not desiring to take any action, so I would request that we do have a lot of stuff on our plate right now, and let's focus on what's the council does want us to do.
Okay, that one goes do nothing status quo. Naming clarification. Councilmember Cole.
Oh, here we go again. Last week, I think I have straight, we don't have minutes yet, that we are asking the museum board to look at the naming request that Ray Koenig made related to the museum. But given the resolution we adopted, I'm not seeing how that fits in there and what really we're asking them to do. Because there's nothing, well, anyway, we have a process as guidelines, and I'm not seeing how all that fits. I'm not arguing for or against Ray's request, I'm just trying to figure out what it is we are really asking the museum board to do.
In the guidelines, where is it? In the guidelines, it doesn't state specific regimen for this, but it does state that the name would be vetted against the guidelines. So I think the process would just be that if council wanted to move a name forward, it would go to city manager, and then he would push it through. The museum board is probably the best one in terms of this project because the naming of the museum.
Well, in my head is the larger question, I'm sorry. Is council wanting, are we saying we want to consider renaming the museum? That's what the request relates to.
Well, Peggy, absent the minutes, my recollection of what we did last week was we were actually moot on the subject. We weren't asking the museum board necessarily to do anything, at least as a body. We're not asking that. What we did was we adopted a set of guidelines that, at least my reading of them, could allow the museum board to bring forward a recommendation and have it considered and then vetted against the guidelines that we have.
Museum or anybody else can do it.
Or anyone else.
Exactly.
But we did, at the end of that conversation, ask about the McQuarrie request, and you were going to go work that.
Yeah, and I've moved it forward because the council in the first conversation, when you actually directed us to do the naming, my recollection was that a majority of you supported getting it through, and so now you have those guidelines, and so I have
that's a continued follow-through from something.
Yeah, I've already asked him to put it on the next museum board agenda using the council guidelines to vet it, and then it'll route back through. If that's not what you want us to do, we can.
I think that's the fairest thing to do. We have had citizen requests for this. We have created the guideline thing for this. It doesn't mean we're doing anything. It just means we're running it up against what we've already approved as the barometer of which we will make that decision. And then there is a series of public hearings in those guidelines too, where we'll get a chance to hear from the community. We'll get a chance to discuss it.
So they would conduct a hearing?
We will.
Oh, okay.
This is all going to come back to council as
That's what I'm just trying to sort
a
out.
referendum. Would it be, what would we?
Resolution.
Resolution. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so that's all right.
And it moves that.
That's what I was trying to
And
understand.
the museum may not, they may say, we don't feel like it's appropriate.
And then we'll take those guidelines and we'll take that recommendation to make a decision about whether we want to go ahead and we disagree with them and we want to move it ahead or not.
Thank you.
But you guys are comfortable with the museum vetting it? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. South Suburban Park Foundation, Councilmember Taylor.
I'm going to start off with my recommendation is that we go forward with number 4 on directing staff. In our 2012 budget, we have appropriated a sum of money for doing things along the Platte River, and we've spent part of that money planting trees. We've got another tree planting project coming up soon that's going to come out of that funds. But totally between those two tree planting projects, we've spent about $60,000. We had $100,000 set aside in this fund. So I'd like to ask staff to come back next meeting with a resolution to give a grant to the South Suburban Park Foundation of $20,000 And that 20,000 will go into their administrative fund. It'll do things like helping print their newsletter. It'll be a match for grants. They've got some grant applications out with private foundations. It requires a match. It could be used for the community maps that they print. It can be used for helping pay for the planner that they employ for doing the next phase of the East Side Trail, which is going to extend further northward. It can be used for several things. So I'd like to take part of that money that we have already appropriated and have it go to the foundation as a grant.
Michael?
Jim, can you tell me what fund, because I tried to do some research on this in advance to be prepared. Where did you say the money was appropriated from? Conservation Trust?
You know, I don't know where it came from. We just set aside $100,000
All right.
in the budget to do this, and we did the planting along the East Side Trail, and then the next planting along the East Side Trail is coming out of this funds.
All right, and I can confirm, and if we need to do something different, we certainly can. But if the council is supportive of Councilman Taylor's request, what we found in looking at this was that there was $300,000 of undesignated coming out of the Conservation Trust. And those dollars can be spent on the acquisition, development of parks. I think everything's in line. But those dollars have already been appropriated. So as long as you're comfortable with spending the $20,000 in the fashion that Jim has mentioned, all we need from you is your head nod around this table, because we don't need any legal action from you.
Well, I'm confused because we gave them $100,000 and they've only used $60,000, so they really have $40,000 left. And now we want to give them another $20,000?
It'd come out of that 40 that's left.
Okay, so
And we
of the
did-
300,000, because we've given them about 100,000 each
Yep.
year.
But I don't think we couldn't find that we actually gave them $100,000 and said, you spend it as we see fit.
We didn't
Okay.
give it to them. We've
Well,
kept
we've
that in
already
this-
appointed that. We
right.
approved that.
We approved it, but it never, the physical transfer never made. The city kept the money, but we spent it for East Side Trail plantings for the one that's already been done that Peggy and I helped plant trees on.
Who spent that money?
The city and South Suburban and the foundation.
So we wrote a
together.
check for that?
We paid for the trees
Okay.
for that, and it was planted by volunteers from South Suburban, the city, and some service clubs.
So I wish we could make this cleaner. If we're going to give these guys $100,000, why don't we just write them a $100,000 check and let them spend it? Because now we've got these random tree bills and
You're going to see many fewer undesignated project line items next year.
So could you do a little checking and then just let us know during your comments next week?
Yeah, and I'm primarily just looking for confirmation that the council supports Councilman Taylor's
yeah,
request.
it's not new money. It's just saying.
Yeah, and it's already appropriated money.
Well, as
Yeah.
long as it's actually really there.
No, it's there. There's plenty.
Money.
Okay.
Bruce?
Well, I understand the money's there, but if it has some hooks on it, if it can go for, I mean, Jim's list was a little bit longer than what it may be allowed to be used for. And I love the foundation, but I might be a little parochial and say it would be nice if it's actually used in Littleton, but, because I know the foundation's reach is a little bit broader.
If it weren't for the foundation, we wouldn't have what we got now. And we had many contributors to get to where we are now.
Yeah.
That came from outside the city of Littleton, who helped us build our trails.
Bruce?
Jim,
I can be open-minded, too.
what was the original intent of the allocation or the allotment?
I think when we talked about it in the budget session last year, we talked about putting it toward the foundation to use for another bridge across either Big Dry or across the Platte River. If it's across the Platte River, it takes more than a single year because $100,000 won't pay for a bridge. But that's not what we ended up spending it for. We ended up not giving them the money, as Debbie suggested.
Right.
We kept it in our own funds because there's never any request for going forward with putting a bridge in, and spend it for tree planting.
And notwithstanding it's already been designated, this is more of the open space oriented kind of stuff that we have to spend? I mean, you said Conservation Trust.
It's a separate fund. It's not the open space fund.
Is it county, or it's?
No, it's
Conservation.
Conservation Trust funds comes from through the state.
Through the state?
It's not the open space fund. It's.
Okay, but it has to be spent on open.
I don't know what the requirements are. I know the open space is pretty tight.
But there are requirements to that, I
Okay.
think.
We should check that out.
Debbie, I guess I'd like to get accounting, what the heck it is we're talking about. We keep talking, everybody keeps kind of talking across each other, and we're not really sure, it seems. I'd like the accounting of what the dollars we're talking about, the purposes, and if as Phil said, any strings. Is that something?
Okay, I think, yeah.
Yeah, we can. I mean, it would be helpful because I think at the end of this, there aren't going to be, the dollars are appropriated, the uses of Conservation Trust are relatively broad, and so if it's indeed there, we can save some time if the council supports what Councilman Taylor's asking for. If you want to wait, we can certainly do a full report, but if you like what he's proposing within that already focused $100,000, then give us a go-ahead, and we'll just send an email saying, just close the loop so you guys all know, but we don't have to come back for additional conversation, or we can come back.
I guess there's two layers to this. One layer is we already appropriated $100,000. It's underspent. They would like to have some to finish. So we basically have already said we get $100,000, and I don't know that nitpicking it in terms of how they're going to spend it is our job as so much as if it's okay for that trust money to be spent that way, and that group needs that, then I say we do it. Second, or I don't see a big snag on it. It's almost like we already have approved it. But the second layer to that is that can we make this cleaner in the future? Because this is feeling sloppy to me. Okay. Is everybody okay with that?
No.
Okay.
I'm just uncomfortable understanding what it is we're doing here. I wasn't a part of this $100,000 thing, so I just don't know what it is. I'm going to say, yeah, go do 20,000.
When, I don't know when, it was before budget season, and Jim made a motion to include a $100,000 grant to the South Suburban Park Foundation. And I think it's the third or fourth year.
Yeah, we've done it for a number of years.
And council approved it, and the money would come specifically out of the Conservation Trust Fund.
Was this the 100,000 that was going to go for the bridge or whatever that didn't materialize, or did materialize and I wasn't paying attention? And then we said, we've got this money, and therefore, let's...
I think you asked specifically for the trees on this one.
I don't know.
2 years ago, it was a bridge.
Wasn't the big discussion whether we write them the check up front or whether we make them come back to us for requests? I kind of recall some.
There was a little discussion on that. Yeah.
I kind of remember conversation about that.
And Bev said she would come back.
Yeah.
She was willing, yeah.
Yeah, she was willing to come back.
I mean, we have kind of general thought to do this, but I think it's important that we have everybody knowing what we're talking about, not just outvote or out nod our heads to someone. And it would seem to me we could have this information for our general discussion next week.
Well, I respectfully disagree, because I don't feel as though I don't know that the discussion is about giving new money. The discussion, he has $100,000, that group, we already gave that group $100,000. It's kind of like how they spend it. It wasn't, so, but I do think that it's the messiness of it, and I get where you're at, Jerry, because it feels messy. Let's clean up that messy, so that we don't wind up here again next time. Phil.
What I look at it is rather than giving us a specific bill, they have an itemization of a number of things that they're looking for. So, rather than a bill for trees, we're getting a bill that maybe it's a little fuzzier than some of the other items. The only check that I agree with you, everything, the only thing I want to make sure is that this is not an additional appropriation that we haven't gone through. It's within that existing limit. Provided it's within the existing limit, I'm with you.
And I did get confirmation from finance today on that.
Okay.
So that's why.
Oh, so you did.
Jerry, I'm
Yes.
sorry, it is messy.
And it probably doesn't need to be messy. Part of what's happened in the past is that they have been able to use that chunk on one thing. This year, that didn't happen, so it's a little bit more
Usually there's been a big project,
And the money comes from where?
Conservation Trust Fund.
which is state.
Lottery dollars
Lottery dollars.
based on population.
And it's one of our funds, one of our fund balances.
And it is a restricted fund. It has certain uses. It's fairly broad, but, okay.
Everybody cool?
I will close the loop with the council on that one.
Thank you. Bruce?
Nixon said, trust but verify.
Exactly.
And I think that's where my comfort level is.
Reagan said that, wasn't it?
Well, Reagan may have said that too. I think all of us have said it at one time or other, but that's the issue is, we're probably, the fact really is, it's probably within the administrative purview of the city to move this since it was already.
Yes, the
approved
charter
by-
gives the manager, I believe it's the charter gives me the discretion on here, but since the councilman had brought it up.
But now that it's out there,
yes.
it's the verified piece.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
We'll do that for you.
Okay, then, next item. This one's easy. Wastewater treatment plant. Nutrient regulation update timeline, strategic plan. Do we need our own lobbyist communication plan?
No.
This is a concern from really all of us, brought to the table tonight by myself, Councilmember Stallman, and Councilmember Beckman. Bruce, I'll let the two Bruces tag team on this one.
I wanted to take it off at the pass, but go ahead.
Well, certainly we're not going to win a legal battle against the EPA, so it's not really that kind of direction that I'm thinking about. But there's ways in which these requirements can be met. And it seemed from our meetings up at CML, there are different approaches, different timelines, different phasing, and that these have been acceptable to EPA throughout the country. And I just felt that seemed to make sense, but I felt that Colorado Department of Health wasn't willing to play that game very much. And so I began to feel like, well, wait a minute, who's looking out for us? And I further had the feeling that when the whole circumstance of nutrient problems throughout the country was being discussed, and then Colorado, wow, Littleton began to be all by itself, unique, and sort of a subset of a lot of other discussions. So I began to feel that we didn't maybe have a place at a table that we needed to have, or that maybe we didn't have all the knowledge that we needed to have based on the way some of these other folks around the country have dealt with this, and that ultimately there's no legal battle we're going to win, but it's about how do we, between now and 2022, find a way to economically meet a requirement that's going to be placed on our shoulders. And I didn't think we had enough information. And I felt I was very lacking of it there. And I didn't feel like, nor did I feel like we had consultants on hand who could provide that, who we were paying for, who were looking out for our interests. So that was where I was coming from.
Yeah, and I mean, and I wasn't there at CML, but my concern around this issue is, as they've talked about possibly using a tiering approach, we're a larger one, and the measurement happens at a reservoir that's downstream, that's collecting everything. It's not what we're putting back in the river that we're being measured against. It's what's happening at a reservoir that some of the folks that aren't in the higher or tougher requirement tier don't have to meet, and we get penalized for what ends up being in the river.
Exactly.
And that sounds so poor.
Okay, Bruce.
In my opinion, our staff with the city does an outstanding job of running the city. Notwithstanding, we've had some differences of opinion with respect to the staff at the sewer plant. Their technical expertise, I don't think, is called into question. I think they know how to run a sewer plant. But neither of these skill sets is really the issue on the table here. What we're staring down is an extraordinary amount of money, but it in and of itself is the tip of the iceberg, because the fact that we have a sewer plant that is a measuring point that can be regulated this way just means repeatedly we're going to continue to get more and more of these things well after we're all off council, dead and buried. And on, as far as our fiduciary responsibility to the citizens of Littleton and the ratepayers and the districts, what we need with something like this is we need a comprehensive understanding of the timeline, of the decision tree, what happens at what point in time, what are our options, if such and such happens here, what can we do? Part of this is a tactical delaying action. Part of it does need to be legal. Part of it needs to be thinking way outside the box in terms of what alternatives are potentially available. And for that reason, in my opinion, we need some people with skill sets that we just do not have accessible to us. And it's no disrespect to you guys. It's no disrespect to the guys at the sewer plant.
We're appreciating that we don't have that skill set.
Well, Dave Robbins is an excellent water attorney, but I'm not entirely convinced that what we're dealing with here is a water legal issue. It's way broader than that. It's science, it's economics, it's public policy. We may not be able, it's lobbying. We may not be able to beat the EPA in a lawsuit, but we can skirmish them up and down the line and maybe delay this thing for years. And every time we delay having to spend tens or if not hundreds of millions of dollars, everybody, wins, unless they want to write us a big check, which I think is crazy given the amount of nutrient reduction we're talking about. But that's a bigger policy issue. But hence, the issue for me is we need something. We need a more comprehensive view of what our alternatives are, what our strategy is, because we've got, with engineering, with paralleling some sort of engineering on this thing, I mean, if we've got 10 years to get to a place that is way different than where we are now, the amount of work that goes into getting there on parallel paths, while trying to figure out how to avoid or derail the whole thing is just something we don't know what we don't know, to use our favorite phrase from the economic development. And that's really true on this one.
So,
I don't know. Hold on. Let me see. Go ahead, Michael.
well, I have somewhat of a plan of attack in terms of how just to start that conversation. And some of this, obviously, as you heard, came from the CML. And it reminded me, and I think Councilman Taylor has probably sat in many of these, that CML does a great job of actually hosting on specific issues that aren't really of statewide concern necessarily, because you don't hit that level, but there are a number of communities that are interested. And so what I was going to suggest is that we contact Kevin Baumer, who's the lead on this issue at CML, and if the council's comfortable, I would work with Councilman Stallman and put together, set up a meeting that would involve, because remember, there's 42 other plants that are in this and part of Colorado Nutrient Coalition that are there. Invite those guys, get somebody from the governor's office. We don't have to brainstorm tonight who all the players are, but get those guys in the room. I know CML would be happy to host that type of meeting and lay out that strategy, because we don't need to go at this alone. I think we'd fail if we go at this alone. John Hendricks is probably the top lead in CNC, so maybe start with him and Kevin Baumer about how to pull this together. But it seems to me that that's the place, because this conversation is probably happening in multiple jurisdictions right now. And so if we want to be a catalyst, let's start by bringing all the players together, make sure we're in the room so that you guys can hear it, and certainly get, the Brown and Caldwells involved,
Right.
David Robbins, whoever the expertise, to start drilling down in those areas that the group decides is appropriate for it.
But maybe the two,
Yeah, I just.
or whoever you guys.
You had a
collectively
good
want.
summary statement that I wasn't going to try to write down, so.
Sure.
In terms of the goal.
Just the one piece of it that I still am troubled with is we don't know what we don't know. And I don't know who is in the various places where things are happening now that would represent us out of our current staff. I mean, I appreciate everything you're saying, but in the meantime, there are meetings that are occurring, there are discussions, there are nuances, there's other things, and we don't have a representative there. We haven't had a representative in the watershed discussions, and we didn't have a representative when, just a little off the subject, but
Chatfield.
or Chatfield. And so, we just haven't been in the game. I think we need to get in the game that exists, as well as the things that you're discussing.
But I think we have been in the game, and what we haven't probably done then is done the feedback loop. So David Robbins, for example, has been our prime person in the game. He and his staff have been there testifying. They ran I think Kirsten was there as well when they ran their presentation for the testimony by the supervisors committee, talked about making sure that we kept our legal options open. I mean, it may not be all-inclusive. It's all-inclusive in terms of what Bruce is talking about, but we are not sitting on the sidelines for a lot of these. We're engaged with it. David Robbins, I sent Bruce a follow-up on question of some upcoming meetings that are there, and we've got our legal representation out there. If what we need to do is do the feedback loop so you're cognizant of what's occurring at those meetings, then that's a communication thing on our side that we can improve.
I think the fiduciary issue is right here. The expertise may be at the water treatment plant, and some of the thought process from an engineering point of view might be there. But it comes back to the fiduciary point here, because just simply if it means that in 10 years we have to have $200,000, we need to start today. We need to talk about rate hikes today. And we need to,
100 million.
Sorry, 200 million. We need to talk about rate hikes today. We need to begin to educate the public today. I mean, so that's where I'm feeling that pressure. And I don't know if those are even the right steps to take or appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, and
Phil?
I'm going to make a suggestion that it sounds like there's enough of this to move to another study session where we might get a summary or at least a presentation on where we're at, if it includes Hendricks and Balmer. That's fine, whoever needs to be in a position to help us, but we're not going to finish working the issue because there's enough zeros in this that it's important.
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Moved.
you want us concurrently to talk to CML as well?
Yeah.
I would.
Because
Everything and anything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
because it could take a while to get the study session set
I'm
up.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
stop anything. I
Okay,
just said,
all right. So,
Yeah.
Beckman, do you want to be in on that, or?
I'd love to be in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
The
set that up.
Bruces.
The two Bs, got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, residential commercial rewards for landscape enhancements, code enforcement regarding brown yards. Councilmember Taylor.
Actually, there's three things I'd like to talk about. And one is some kind of reward system for outstanding home landscape. It could be a self-nomination or a neighbor nomination or an organization. But I think that needs to go to the staff to look at as a budget item, whether we could do that. And it may be one of the things that we'd use as a task force to help select what that winner might be if we went that direction. But that's something that could go to staff to mull over. The old Walmart site, now where the Abear property where Designs by Sundown happens to be, walking by on the Platte River Trail the other day, looking over there, it is an absolute eyesore. There is junk everywhere. There's boats parked there. There's cars parked there. There's a dumpster that has got trash spilling all over it. It's got stored stuff that I'm not sure is legally storable there. I guess I'd like to ask staff to take a look at all of that and see if it needs some code enforcement to clean the back part of that up, because it certainly gives a black eye when people walk along the trail and look over there at that site. And the third thing is on brown yards, and part of my moving around town, I've noticed that there are businesses as well as homeowners that have lawns that are turning brown. And I think we've got a code in regulation that says you need to do something about that. And there could be extenuating circumstances under conditions this year with the drought, with people losing their jobs, with people getting reduced hours at work. There could be many reasons. And so I guess the question is, do we continue to actively enforce that part of our regulations, or do we, in this circumstance, begin to kind of turn the other side and kind of ignore it? And I don't have an answer for that because I don't know what to do.
Do we know if we have a code on?
I don't know off the
Brown
top, but
lawns.
we can check.
Okay.
Well, most of the yards that are brown definitely have weeds that are exciting. So at least the weed piece.
But the regulation says you don't have to do anything about it until they get 8 inches tall.
Well, the brown yards I see all have 8-inch or more tall weeds. And, I mean,
Huh?
At least they're green.
The weeds are green, the
the
grass is
weeds
brown.
The weeds
Yeah.
are green, the
More
brown, the
weeds,
yards
the
are
more
brown.
green the yard will be.
What I would suggest we do is direct this to staff to shoot us an email based on what we find out on code. If there's,
Then the question is, do we enforce what we've got on the books, or do we, under the circumstances this year?
so let's say if we do have something on the books that we would enforce on brown lawns, then we would want staff to bring back a resolution to a regular meeting that we could vote on whether or not we wanted to relax that.
My guess is it's complaint basis only right now as it is, and do we need council action?
Well, we would probably want to put something in the ordinance, yeah. So we need to look at that.
Okay.
I'm just not sure.
Okay.
I'll follow up with you then.
I thought right now, just out of practice, we were doing complaint-based.
I'm
But,
sure from a staffing level, yeah.
yeah, but I don't think the code says it's complaint-based.
No, I'm sure it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, we would never write that into the code.
Jerry?
Colorado's an arid state, and we're going to go through droughts, and people are going to get brown yards, and then they're going to get green come spring. I'm just not comfortable thinking that people need to water their grass more just so that we don't have a brown lawn in an arid state.
Well, I'm not comfortable.
Watering your grass is something that can get expensive. I know we just got our water bill, and it's really expensive because we've kept it green, and now we're going to start backing off, and it's going to start to get browner and browner. And if someone comes by and says, Jerry, water your lawn more, I'm going to say, and you please write me the check so that I can go ahead and pay for that water. And I think there's a lot of folks around town, and I have the luxury of being able to pay my water bill. There's a lot of folks that the water bill is something that they do have to trim back on. And I think it's something, if we're going to look at the code, let's look at the code.
Peggy?
Yeah, I probably didn't make my comment clear. I'm not so concerned with the brown yard. I am concerned with the weeds, particularly the noxious ones that are, I mean, they seem to grow up through newly paved asphalt almost. So That's my concern more, for the same reason you said. We know, I went to some meeting someplace in the last year or so where Aurora talked about, hey, they required people to have these big green yards. Well, then they got into the water. Where are we going to get the water from for the city, right? But then comes the issue of the cost of paying for the water, and so they changed regulations. I can remember if they said that at that meeting in January or when, but somewhere in the last year I've heard that issue. So we want to encourage conservation, I think, but not weeds.
Okay. That kind of moves us gently. Okay, Michael.
Well, so we can certainly look at the Abear property, but the other request that Councilman Taylor had was awards for outstanding landscaping.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious whether council wants us to do any work on that.
Show of hands to move it forward. I was going to say, you got to vote for yourself.
Okay.
Okay, well, that actually kind of moves us into the next one, which is neighborhood support / proactive code versus reactive. This is something that I would ask council to consider us putting this on a study session and actually have the neighborhood, I don't know what they called him, neighborhood director, coordinator, partner
About Mark?
from Longmont
Oh.
come down and talk. This was a presentation at CML. What was fascinating to me was what Longmont has done is they've actually put a division in their city services that is based, I don't know the exact name, it's neighborhood and community, and it works with neighborhood relations. And so issues like the weeds, issues like a beautiful yard, issues with sidewalks, those types of things where a lot of these things where code gets involved, what they've done is they've created a program where there's actually more of a partnership amongst the neighborhoods and amongst the citizens, because one of the things they said is, government should do what they do well and don't do the rest of it. And there's some stuff we just don't do well, and a lot of that is this brown yard, green weeds and stuff like that. There was enough information presented in this and enough resources that were given out that I felt that this definitely had a lot of opportunity for us to hear about it, learn more about it, spend 45 minutes or an hour on a study session, and then think about how we can create, if we want to, something similar that would be a service to a lot of these things that just seem to kind of fall through the crack and land in weird little places. One of the things that was, I thought, fascinating too was how they use this to reach out to the community, and how these neighborhood groups were able to, for lack of a better word, infiltrate neighborhoods and HOAs that we have a difficult time doing. It's on the foot. I mean, it's foot patrol stuff. These guys are going door to door, handing out flyers, and all the logistics of it is all something we would, study. But what they found in doing this is that they were able to extract an awful lot more citizen involvement from the community. So they were pulling great boards and commissions members out of this. They were pulling council members out of this. So it was really one of those things that was kind of circling back and wrapping around in a whole lot of other ways that I thought was fascinating, because that's one of the things I think every city does struggle with a bit, is how do you get into some of these places where how do you break through some of the apathy? And then the one thing that I think we all know is that everybody pretty much stays to themselves until something touches them, something affects them. The neighbor's dog starts barking. The neighbor's car goes up on things, what they call the weeds get to 8 inches, So it was just one of those things that it seemed that it could solve an awful lot of problems at a very, very low cost in a very, very friendly and cordial manner, where it was more of, and they didn't call it code enforcement either. And then some of the things that, just one of the things I thought was fascinating is that they said a lot of it is learning how to talk to people and learning how to talk to your audience. And one of the things that cities tend to do is and we do this, you hand people a snow route. These are the streets we plow, period. These are the ones we don't. Yours. So what you should do, the better message is, this is why we plow these streets. That's the message. This is why these streets are plowed. These are streets that are arterials or secondary streets, and they are used by, And so then there's a better understanding of why we plow those, hence why we can't, plow another. And a lot of it is just that kind of messaging. So I thought it was fascinating. Like I said, there's tons of information. There's this gentleman who does the neighborhood group. He's just an amazing talker. Bruce, were you in that one with me?
I was amazed.
Okay.
I support what you're saying totally.
Good. I thought, I knew there was another council member there.
Which session was this again?
It was called From Public Input to Public Office, Engaging Your Residents. So if, any questions or comments? Bruce, do you want to?
Just, this would be a total change from the way that we do business, the way they represented it. And what it was not the oppressive HOA enforcement. It was none of that. It was, these are ways to make a quality neighborhood. This is information that you want in your neighborhood to help your neighborhood be quality. These are the places where you shine. These are the places where you need help. I mean, it was just a total positive approach. They had identified 56 neighborhoods, if I recall that. Each neighborhood with a point of contact. It was not, again, an HOA enforcement person orientation at all. And it wasn't neighborhood watch. It was not with the police. It was about quality neighborhoods, identifying neighborhoods, point of contact, providing all kinds of information. This is how you take care of the weeds in your lawn. This is how you take care of this, how you take care of that. And so it was always proactive and it was always positive.
So you guys would like a study session?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the great things was they had a little flyer that they gave to people that,
I think we're agreed, it's going to a study session.
You're
well,
selling
the
fans
flyer had some of the guidelines, but on the edge of the flyer, on the edge of the flyer, there was an 8-inch ruler.
This is mayor's prerogative time?
I guess.
There was an 8-inch ruler, so then everybody now has, 8-inch, here's what your weeds. All right, next one.
You did.
National Night Out.
Involved to shut things off.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes, so I just asked Mr. Penny during the week, are we going to be honoring National Night Out? Are the police and fire doing something?
No.
No, so they're not. So is there anything for any of us to be doing? Do you know, is anybody in the city planning to do something?
No. No, and I haven't gotten a response back, but I can email it out. I asked Chief Coogan if we had knowledge of what neighborhoods might be doing something, so we could pass that out to you. But when it went away in the budget, we're not planning on taking any action at this point, so doing anything. So if you guys know of neighborhoods, obviously you can go and.
But the Alumni Association ran it last year and did the surveys based upon past groups who had hosted a site,
And
they kind of coordinated.
Yeah, and it went down, as I understand it, the number of participating neighborhoods dropped drastically when police and fire stopped attending. But it was cut from the budget, so we're not doing anything this year. So it's only if we hear of a neighborhood that's participating, and that's what I hope to get from the chief and be able to.
Yeah, well, I
pass out
thought
to
maybe
you
she
guys.
was checking with the alumni group.
I didn't ask who she's checking with. I just asked the question.
So,
I
yeah.
will pass it back to you when I
A
get
little
it.
bit short. So maybe if you could check to see, then we would still know for next week's meeting whether we want to start late on that night.
Oh,
Are you,
Well,
is your neighborhood having one?
No, we're not going to do it on that night. We would probably do it a different time. I think one of the things that's happened with this program is that the reason you do it on that night is because it's a national night out, because the police, I mean, that's the whole hoopla of it. If that isn't going to happen, then I would strongly suggest that we send a message to the neighborhoods that says, please continue to have a block party, please continue to do this type of camaraderie and relationship building with your neighbors. It just doesn't have to be on that night. You going to pay them their overtime?
On patrol where they might drive by.
That's true. Grab some barbecue.
We invite them to our annual party, but we just want them to get there early so that they leave early so that we can party late.
Partying later. Does council want to change the meeting on that night to start later, or go ahead and keep it at 7 o'clock?
What night is it again?
First Tuesday in
A
August.
Tuesday.
Which Tuesday?
The first Tuesday.
First Tuesday.
It's our regular meeting in August, first regular meeting in August. Show of hands if you want to start at 8. Okay. Jim?
I can tell you that I went to them last year, and I didn't see a drop-off in attendance in the ones that I went to. There were just not as many of them before. I think that I normally would go to 6 in my district, and there were only like 4 last year. But the attendance at the 4 was about the same as it's always been, and it's because of the neighborhood organization itself. Mm-hmm. And if any publicity comes out about it and they're going to do it again, I'd like to go again, of course. But
Well, most of them start at 6 with the lower number, perhaps. I think starting our meeting at 8 is, depending on how much business we have, that can go kind of long, and we do have people who follow the meetings too. So, what do you guys want to do?
If we're getting a list, but then I guess it's incumbent upon someone to put the list together. It had the addresses, but if we're not coordinating the list, I just don't know how. You know who's doing what in your district, but I don't know who's doing what in which district.
But we still have till next Tuesday to set that meeting. So if we could find out,
yeah,
at least from the alumni.
Yeah, we'll find out from the alumni. I'm not planning, unless, it was cut from the budget, so.
It's not a city thing.
Yeah, it's not us anymore. It's now up to, so we'll ask the alumni, but whatever we get back from that, and I just emailed the chief again, so we'll see if we can find out. But that's all I would do, is just send out neighborhoods that we know of. And
I would say why don't you next week give us whatever information you have, and then at that point, if somebody wants to make a motion to move the meeting to 8, then we'll entertain that. Okie dokie. CML session summary. Jerry, you had put this on yours.
I put it down because I thought you were just looking for possible things to talk about. I didn't realize I was actually going to give a little thing on it, but I can, since you've asked.
Well, I think what you wanted
Yeah.
to do was to see if we wanted to have a larger meeting on the CML sessions.
Is that what, I'm not too sure that's what I want. I thought,
Okay.
looking for ideas, and so I put down things we could all talk about. Some of this, since my name is on this, it was my first conference, annual conference. I thought it was a very good conference, by the way. A lot of interesting subjects, sessions, I should say. I think one of the things I'd like to see, and Jim Taylor and I, we did discuss this briefly in between sessions one time, that it could possibly be helpful if maybe we coordinated some of the sessions that we attend. There are so many good sessions. Like, I would have loved to have gone to the nutrients one, and I know when Bruce came out of there, Beckman, that he was just fired up over that. Wow, that sounded like a good one. So I was glad you were able to go to that, as well as some others. But there's some other sessions I would have liked to have attended, but you can only go to so many at the same time. But I think maybe next time, if we at least let everybody know where we are, so we know that
were out there. Also,
I agree.
information, as Mr. Taylor did point out last week, is available on the CML website, as we all know. And I downloaded, I think, every one of them, and one by one I'm going through them, and there are really some good information in there. I thought that part is well done, and I think with technology as it is today, I think it's great that we have these computers, because I was able to go to the sessions and take the computer and then do my thing right there and make the notes on it. And then, in fact, I just got the packet for the housing, Littleton Housing Authority meeting, and again, it's a good inch or two thick. And then when I see that we no longer have that, we're down to just, 6 pages of pieces of paper here. I think the savings, I think we're really going to realize the savings on this thing. I know the Planning Commission, they probably have a boatload of things too. So I think that was a good move. And many of the folks at that conference, they too have their, it seems like iPods is the most popular. And as I go to other meetings in the real estate industry that I go to, you're seeing more and more folks with their iPads versus the hard copy type stuff. So I think the city's definitely moved in the right direction on that. I think that's pretty much it. It's interesting to see what everybody did or did not it cost the city. Like Debbie, I know that you spent your time at somebody's house, your maybe family place, and I thought that was interesting too. But it was interesting to see that we all were within probably $20, $40 of each other in our spending, other than you who had your lodging somewhere else. But that was pretty good. I do think it was a worthwhile adventure to go to.
Tim?
Well, the CML board, executive board retreat is this coming weekend, and one of the things that I ask that we talk about is not only is the sessions on the website of what they're being presented, but how we can do a follow-up, because sometimes the questions that are asked at the end of the meeting has a lot of relevance, and the answers that come back are very important as well, and how we can try to capture that in the future. And I wanted to ask the board to talk about that this weekend, is what we might be able to do to enhance that type of, that follow-up.
And I think you'd even asked maybe for some input. I think I may have seen an email on that. But one of the other things I thought too, it'd be good to see a session on maybe sometime is the shared walking and biking trails. I know when I go down to Mary Carter Trail, I'm getting to the point where I don't even like walking it anymore because of the bicycles that go whipping by. And my daughter just got ran over by a bike and ended up in the hospital the other day. And I think about that every time someone rides by me, what would it be like to get hit? And I'm a bigger bodied person, but it could still do some damage to any of us to get hit. And I know walking on that trail down there, it can be spooky at times when you're walking. And some of the riders are very polite, and they let you know, on the left type thing. But there's others that aren't as polite. So it might be worth seeing, Jim, if you could throw that into the CML group. What are cities doing around the state to deal with those kind of issues?
Well, and South Suburban did have some volunteer individuals that were, I won't say patrolling. I mean, they were, as they rode, and they reminded folks of some of the proper etiquette would be.
Well, my proper etiquette would be take my nunchucks and put it through their spokes.
It wasn't necessarily.
Because that's great that they have people doing that, but it still isn't effective at this moment.
Yeah.
And that's probably even a bigger issue to deal with, because the entire use of that area is just each year escalating. And so with the use of it, we're not only seeing that type of thing happen, but we're also seeing a lot more trash and litter and destruction and going into places that they shouldn't go. We're seeing a lot more homelessness coming down and staying, using it as a park that way. So I think that's a bigger story, and that may be something that we work with on South Suburban. And I'm 100% with you. I think, quite honestly, and this is a little off subject, I think we need some more rangers down there big time.
Yeah. But I thought, to the CML, I thought it was good to go to, and I look forward to going to one next year.
I think your original comment was great, and Michael, part of what Jerry said was that we'd like to try to coordinate sessions next year. So perhaps Maureen could come up with some grand grid, and we can see where we're covered and where we're not covered. And
And there's definitely going to be ones that, as individuals, we want to go. I went to one on affordable housing, and the room was rather full. And it amazed me, because I've been in the industry so long, to see people who were asking questions that just seemed so basic about affordable housing. And there was, one of the speakers was from Chaffa, and the other one was from was it the Colorado Division of Housing, I think it was. So, and they gave us some good information. But it was interesting to see that a lot of communities just don't know about affordable housing, the financing part of it. So that was a good session, Jim.
Okay, anything else on that?
I did that in just under 7 minutes, and I think I had all 10 available.
Very good.
I yield my time.
Thank you. Breakfast outreach meetings. You guys all have a copy of our current schedule. And what I wanted to do was run through these with you, because I want to make sure that we're okay with what we've got coming up for the rest of the year. Did I just take
I printed mine out and left it at home, of course.
Okay.
I didn't remember. It's my calendar.
This is yours, Michael. This is
No, it's okay. I'm good. I printed it. Okay, I'll hold it out. I didn't say it, Jim.
Thank you.
It's on my calendar.
So, starting with July 19th, we have a meeting, it's on the calendar, or we've got it written here for South Metro Denver Realtor Association and the Littleton Housing Authority, and I would suggest that we change that. I think I'm not sure we need to meet with the Littleton Housing Authority at this point, and I guess I would suggest that we move the realtors back to later, when we have a little bit more economic development education under our belt and can wrap it into a larger conversation with them and perhaps include some other entities. I am okay with not moving it, but what I want everyone to be very conscientious of and consider is, what are we going to talk about? I think we've had two that have been really great. The one with Centennial was very dynamic, and we got an awful lot of good information and back and forth, and they really appreciated the meeting. And I think the one we just had with the legislators was also good. So I just, it's a commitment for everybody to do. It's early, and when we ask these folks to come in, I just want it to be really worthwhile. So unless we're trying to figure out things to talk about, then I think maybe we can.
So they weren't already invited? I mean,
no, they have not been invited.
Whoa.
No.
That in itself is probably a problem.
I wouldn't be there anyway. So.
When are you going to move it to?
At this late date, if nobody's been invited, I think it's going to be awfully late to try to pull anybody in for a meeting next week.
Yeah.
No, that's right, it is next week. They went the month. Yeah, I had another date issue today. So, okay, then let's just move to August 16th. Everybody okay with keeping that one?
Just cross out the 19th.
Cross out July 19th?
I would like to,
We'll move them.
yeah, I think it's, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I would move them, and, I think having them aware of, I know it's not specifically on land use, but I know you mentioned economic development, but it's also the land use, and then the discussion that we had around and I might invite them when it's talking about neighborhood issues, and what you were talking about is having someone from Longmont come down. These folks are concerned about the values of properties in neighborhoods, and how neighborhoods appear and look, and that impacts what they're doing. So it's not just the commercial side of it, too.
Yeah, and when we've met with them before, they've been real anxious to participate, and they've got a bunch of grant programs, and when you start these little neighborhood things, little grant programs like that really help. So, okay, that's a good idea, Phil. So August 16th, I think that looks like a good group. Does anybody see any problems with that? Do you think we can put together a good, powerful agenda there?
I'd like that historic perseveration.
She found it.
I'd put something in every document.
That's right.
Probably taking bets. Jeez.
And then on September 20th, that was one when we were planning the breakfast that we wanted to do, was to bring in businesses. Each of us invite a couple of business folks from our district to come in and talk. And it might be, by September 20th, we'll have a couple more educational sessions for economic development under our belt. It might be a good opportunity for us to use that as a way to do some economic development study with these businesses. Just a thought. Jim?
Well, if, on that September 20th date, if we combine the South Metro Realtors group with that group for discussion, and the Housing Authority, we would move into one of our study sessions like we do our other boards and commissions and authorities meetings. So you've got the South Metro Realtors and the businesses that we're going to invite.
Okay, the only concern I would see there is that there's 7 council members, we each invite a business, or 7 businesses, we probably have 5 staffers, and then those realtors, they show up, about 18 of them.
No,
we can limit how many they want to bring.
Okay.
I didn't
Can we?
we didn't have that
I'm
many
just,
last year, I didn't
I
think,
got-
did we?
We did.
I received notice I'm out of town on the 20th right now, so
Okay.
that'll be 3 less. So you can put in 3 more realtors.
I think if we limit the number of realtors to, if we ask their board to send 3 or 4, then it just gets to be too, you don't get to have that good banter. Michael, you can take care of that. Okay, so that's,
you guys are talking.
he's playing Angry Bird. Doing Angry Bird.
We're expecting
It's like reviewing stuff for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Sending emails to everybody, telling them what they have to do.
that's right.
So September 20, we decided what?
That we will do the council district meetings and add the South Metro Realtors to it.
Yeah. And are we each going to invite 2 businesses or 1?
I mean, I don't know. I would like to, but there won't be.
That's a lot. That's 14 businesses.
I think we should stick
I'll
with
have to
businesses
by the
alone.
20th, we should be that I can invite.
You don't want to invite realtors then?
Well, no, that's not a matter of not inviting them, but I think with the business folks, I think it would be good to have us be focused on them. If another time with the realtors, and whenever that could be, it'd be great to be focused just on that particular industry.
Is it but the intent is economic development. That's a question, is it?
I just threw that out there. I think we're in the middle of that. It's an opportunity. We're meeting with businesses.
Well, if a person wants to bring a commercial real estate person, that's their prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we can only have so many folks in this room, as you said.
But on the other hand, Jerry, by having if we're talking about economic development, the realtors would be very interested in that too, because that also would help them with their promotion of the city.
So I said that, if we invite 1 or 2, we could, one of the 2 should maybe be a realtor specific instead of just an open invitation.
I think you'd have to limit to their executive board or
Whatever it be, but yeah. I guess I just really want to get into the business thing.
Yeah, I guess I'm starting to feel like it's a little mismatched because to have the realtors there too, because they each come, everybody will come with their own agendas, and the businessman agenda is not the realtors, and vice versa.
All due respect, yeah.
I think it would be better for us to find a better place to have the realtors and try to find another group to maybe hook into that too.
Mayor?
Yes?
We are, as staff, we're working with the realtors, and I realize that's not them talking to you, but we're working with them on some grants right now, and so we've had some interactions with their executive board, and they're also one of the groups that Glenn and I have met with relative to the Northeast neighborhood and getting some of the homes refurbished and flipped over there. So they have been involved with Littleton's government, and will continue to be. We're about to have a larger meeting with developers and realtors and contractors and banks and that type of thing. And so just so you know, there is interaction with them occurring right now, if that helps on delaying it.
Yeah, it's critical to be involved, no doubt.
Yep.
It could even be that we could invite them to one of the study sessions where we do on economic development and have a real one-on-one with them regarding that. It doesn't have to be a breakfast. It can be a study session that we get the quality time with them.
I think they do have, and I don't have any problem if you want to split it up and just focus on a business breakfast, but I do think they've got a lot of substantive input in terms of how the economic vitality of the community translates into property values and school systems and so forth and so on, and what works and what doesn't and why.
Yeah, I agree.
And I agree with that, and we could actually request South Metro use their training room. That's a larger room than this is, and it's available to us, and I think it would probably be a good place to do that, so.
Take it out to, yeah.
One of the ideas that I like about here with the 2 meetings is that it's a little more personal, and the dialogue, I think, is a little easier to flow. When you get 20, 30 people into a room, it becomes more difficult to hear the individual opinions, because it's not like we have a lot of time in the first place.
Yeah.
And again, I think if we were to do the business thing, the business that you may invite could be a realtor. It could be a commercial person. It could be all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be limited in any way. But I still like the idea of having another meeting with the real estate folks, because I think they're critical to this whole thing.
Absolutely.
Since we're not having one in July, could we put 2 meetings in one of these months? Have 2 different...
Some of us have jobs, Peggy.
Yeah.
Well, you're saving it.
I don't.
I'm not saving anything. It just means one day that I won't be late for work.
I think if we've got the realtors on our high level, like Michael says, he's working with them too, and I think as we're doing the study session setups, they need to go on there, and we'll definitely have some stuff that combines that. And honestly, it might even be a great idea a little later on in the year when Glenn's can give us another Mind Mixer Inspire Littleton update, to have them there while that's going on and have some exchange at that point. It's if we can combine some of these and get a more powerful, dynamic conversation.
We have to talk to him about that.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
Can I respond or ask Jerry, would it help, wouldn't help me, but would it help you if we started earlier for the breakfast? Or anybody else?
If there's a meeting that I need to be to, I'll be there.
Well, I know that, but I mean...
Whether it begins at 7 o'clock or 4 o'clock, I was up at 4 o'clock this morning, for instance, looking at planets, by the way, if anybody hasn't seen those. Yeah, whatever meeting is, I'll be there.
No, I'm
So,
just
you know,
asking...
if I miss some work, it's okay, Peggy, 'cause I can always make it up. Sleep is not always that important.
You
Poor
can sleep
Jerry.
when you're dead.
I can sleep all I want when I'm passed. You know, for those of you guys who are retired, and for those of us who are not, you know,
I'm not.
There's plenty of time for us to sleep.
Right.
At some other time. But no, I don't really care, Peggy, what time.
Okay, no, I just
Yeah,
was
that's a good
trying to
Good
accommodate, so...
question, yeah.
October 18th, nonprofit organizations focused on Littleton, including organizations from the Northeast neighborhood. Had a conversation with Michael about this and think it's a really good opportunity to bring Kay in and actually ask Kay to work on helping make this a more dynamic meeting, because I thought it was fascinating when we had Doctors Care here and a couple other people made some of those presentations on was that budget? What was that? When we had, that was the Northeast neighborhood.
Northeast neighborhood.
Yeah. And so
Very good.
get that kind of combined up, because one of the great things about the timing on that too is that a lot of them see that need around the holidays. So we'll have them in here on October 18th. And
Can I ask for a question to be, somewhere in between there, which is, what we had, I thought, helped focus very much on what is working and what is being done right now. Would like to also have some discussion of who and what is missing. What are the gaps that remain? Who's not being reached? Who's not being involved and engaged? Not just the nonprofits, but I'm talking about the community.
Services?
What I don't know the answer. Otherwise, I could tell you. But it's
What gaps there are in services to the?
Who's not being served? Who's not being engaged? What's being missed? And I don't have a particular example, but earlier we talked about ADA requirements. Is that something that is being fully addressed or not? I don't know if there are others. We have, some opportunities where certainly we have the Immigrant Integration Initiative that's run through the library, but it's probably not hitting everyone. There might be some places where things are missed. And I know that not all of and most of social services are not provided by the municipality, but it's our town.
One of the, not to go off the deep end on this, but one of the biggest issues is information communication. Just the ability to network or the lack of knowledge about what's available, whether it's, job opportunities for people with developmental disabilities, for example. There aren't a lot. Or where do you go to find out what they are? And it's brutal. Just healthcare is the same way. It's just, so yeah, there's one of the other groups that you might want to add in on this is somebody like Interfaith. They're based in Englewood, but they do so much within the Littleton community.
That's why I think if we ask Kay to be the
Yeah, I can give you some names too, just some other
Catalyst.
entities that
Just shoot me an email.
yeah,
Well,
okay.
as long as, excuse me.
Bruce. That's okay.
You also have the county that does all the social welfare issues. They keep track of a lot of numbers. They know a lot of what the circumstances are and what the service use is. And they could,
That's good. And we need Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health in too.
Arapahoe Douglas works.
Yeah.
'Cause we have pockets of certain industries where folks are underemployed or yet.
We're going to start calling you down, Mr. Frank.
Very quiet.
Go ahead, Peggy.
When we ask Kay, it's important that we ask her the right thing, because she will give us the answers to what we ask. So, for example, including organizations from the Northeast neighborhood, we want to include also organizations that serve that neighborhood. And there are several of them that will be at the August back-to-school night FET. And then I'm thinking maybe of some of the businesses that have outreach. I don't know, I'm assuming, but I'm not sure, that Nordgren is still doing something, their employees do some volunteer stuff or whatever. I'm not sure, but I don't know how many businesses have some at least semi-organized, inspired outreach to help people. So, knowing more about those.
Kay's got her hands full on this one, right?
He does.
Okay. Perfect. I think that's going to be a great meeting. That's going to be a good one. Okay, November 15th, LPS High School Student Leaders. I think this is one of our favorite meetings each year, but I would offer up that what tends to happen at this meeting is that the students don't always understand what our role is in their community. And so a lot of their questions are based on the school board decisions and rules and guidelines. And so what we have done in the past is we have asked them to send us their questions. What are you interested in knowing? And then so we get their questions and we run through those, and then we have them, have an open forum with them. If in fact we are considering at discussion about a youth committee, might it not be an opportunity for us to structure this more around talking to them about how that would look to them and how would they engage? And I mean, it would take some work. We have until November to do it. CML has an incredible program on civics in the classroom, and how is it something where we bring civics in for them, or is it something where they create, we have a youth committee? I don't know. There's a whole lot of different options, but it might be, let's go ask the youth. These guys are always willing. They've got a lot of answers. I think if we send out information early enough to them through their counselors and the teachers who help support this group, that they can get them pretty well organized and get them focused on where we're headed. So just a thought. I'm not hearing any fussing, so that's...
Because we're thinking.
Oh, tick-tock. Bruce.
On the task force, when we were talking about what this youth entity would look like, that was kind of the direction that we were going, was asking them and maybe doing it at that meeting. So I think you're right on.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
I saw it somewhere, which is Youth Day. Thank you.
Yes.
Trying to help you out.
The one that we're hosting?
Yes.
Yes.
And there might be a way to share some of that, or at least have some folks that might actually be there that.
Yeah, that day's pretty well booked up, but at least we can get some names.
No, I'm not talking about changing that day, but if there might be some connection, because this is after that, right?
Feedback.
Because that's in September.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Ready to move on?
Yep.
Economic Development Symposium and Think Tank update. I will update the symposium.
You missed
Skip one?
your goals and objectives.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, I did skip that. And I actually would suggest that we, because we've talked a lot about different study sessions and stuff like that tonight, and it's all kind of random. Michael hopefully is taking really good notes.
On my iPad.
I would like to just bring that back. We'll get a list of study session ideas and bring that back to either at the end of a general business, at the end of a meeting, or tag it on to 20 minutes to the next study session. I don't think it's an urgent priority.
And I think we've got enough to get us through the end of the year with budget as well.
Yeah,
so.
because we've got budget coming up too, and all the economic development stuff. But I don't want us to lose sight of those study session topics and how they relate to our council goals and objectives, because that, I think, is something we should judge ourselves and our success on each year. Okay, so that, I'm sorry for skipping that, and
Don't be sorry, let's go to the next one.
here we go. Okay, Economic Development Symposium, and, oh, Peggy, did you catch the typo? There's a typo?
Yes,
Symposium?
Symposium.
somebody's hungry.
Suppose. So it's going to be on July 24th, and that's Tuesday. It will be at the museum, 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock. And I've done a lot because I got the Jesus scared out of me when Kelly said, "Do you know that's in 2 weeks?" Oh! So, yeah, time is flying right past. So what we did today, we sent out a press release. I think everybody should have got a copy of that. We have firmed up all of our attendees. Paul Washington is the only one we don't have a firm confirmation on, but it's about a... Paul. He's the economic director for Denver, director of economic development for Denver. So we have right now, the way that I wanted council to hear kind of how the meeting is going to break out. Mayor Hancock can be there only from 6 to 7. So we're going to have it at the museum in the Friends Lecture Hall. The front of the room will have a raised platform. There'll be a podium in the corner, and then there'll be 3 chairs. I think we'll pull in some nice conference room chairs with a table for the other three speakers. So, Mayor Hancock will be at the podium for the first hour, and he will probably walk around it. He doesn't really like to be behind it. Then the other 3 speakers will be seated there. We will have as many chairs as we can fit in. We'll have light refreshments, but they will be in the hallway, because we've got that nice big hallway, put a couple tables out there, coffee, stuff like that, because it is 3 hours. So otherwise we just take up too much room in the room and I think hopefully we'll have quite a few people. We've invited, and let me finish the agenda. So Michael Hancock will speak. We're looking at about a 20-minute talk from him, and then do about a 15 to 20-minute kind of banter with some staged questions going back and forth with him and the other speakers, kind of just bouncing off of each other with some economic stories and tales and that type of stuff. Some of the successes. This has been kind of on a roll of good news lately, so these guys will all kind of play off of that. Then open it up for questions from the audience for the last 20 minutes or so that he's there. And then when he leaves, then we'll have the other ones will speak for about a half an hour each, and then after that half hour, then there'll be half hour for each of them, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers from the audience for the last half hour. So that'll take us up till 9 o'clock on that. And then I've invited the mayors from Centennial, Greenwood Village, Cherry Hills Village, Beaumar, Columbine, Inglewood, Sheridan, Lone Tree. There's a conflict with some of them with a meeting that the mayor in Aurora has called, but they are all either splitting their councils and sending us council members, or they are sending key staff. So we should have representatives from all of those communities. I'm also doing a special invitation, handwritten or a hand-signed invitation to our top 15 businesses in the community to give them a special invitation to please plan to come. Also sending the same invitation to the county commissioners and to the board, the South Suburban Board, and to ACC. So trying to cover all our bases, make it as special as you can for people.
Let us know which businesses you're inviting.
Yeah. I'm supposed to get that list tomorrow, so I will email that out, have Marlene email that out to all of you too. So, like I said, the press release went out, and any word of mouth you can do, any spreading the information, because once you get all the staging and everything set up there, we're probably somewhere between 85 to 90 seats. We may be able to squeeze 100 in there. So I really want to try to fill it up, because that would just be embarrassing not to.
That same night is Euclid too, isn't it?
That's what?
That is Euclid?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, are we going to have this videoed and then broadcast later?
No.
No way to do that?
Cool.
Well, that also will help get people there, because this is it. They can't stay at home and watch it.
You might talk to John Brackney at the South Metro Chamber. He might have 15 up-and-coming small businesses that are also, you might have...
Yeah, we're going to reach out to John.
That's a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kelly's working on that, and if he's got some folks that, I think he could probably fill a room himself. So there's the symposium question.
I was just going to say, by then, we'll be have some untouched, you have some idea on those too.
Okay.
I don't have access to all of the interviews, I just know some of them.
Well, there, without naming any, there are a couple of businesses that maybe we'd like to have represented in Littleton that maybe could be invited.
Well, I'm getting this list, and I'll send it out to you guys. If you have others that aren't on there, feel free to give them a call and invite them. Absolutely.
Well, these are people that I think BIA would know the contact information on.
That's where I'm getting the list from.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the potential people that we might like to have open a business.
Oh,
And
I don't,
I'll
we've
mention
got
one
2 weeks.
afterwards.
I don't know where to find.
I'll mention one
So,
afterwards.
okay. If you've got, get on the phone and call these folks, send them an email. You've got relationships within the community, and it's kind of up to us to go ahead and spread the word. So then you all have the press release, so they've got the names of the folks and their titles and all of that stuff. So if you need any other information, just give me a holler. I either have it or Kelly or Marlene can get it to you. Think Tank.
And Mayor, do you want, if they have any questions, to prep for the mayor?
Oh, yeah, thank you. If you guys would shoot me questions that you have, basically this is going to be about a regionalism and how we all work together and why what Denver does is important to Littleton and why what Littleton does is important to Wheat Ridge and how we really are a larger community supporting the economic growth of the region, how that benefits us all. This is an opportunity for us to get the attention of the Denver group, which they've got all the horsepower. So anything that if you guys have questions that you want to, want asked, because just so that if they're slow times or the awkward silences, I'll have questions to read.
Ask Hancock
I
about
know, I'm just
Gaylord.
trying to be preventative here.
Ask Hancock about Gaylord. That'll keep things moving.
Oh, yeah. Gaylord who? Okay, yeah, so you guys could just, if you don't mind, just email me those. That would be great. Okay.
All right, think tank update. So the council will probably recall that the last handout that I gave you on this, we flipped it so that it had a separation with staff being responsible for the think tank to somewhat avoid the ongoing conversation that was occurring at the council level about to what detail, what direction, how beholden would you be to them on any recommendations that would come to be. So we have put together, we've got 6 folks. We've got developer reps, commercial developers, commercial real estate brokers, residential developer, land use attorney, and banker represented on that. And we are now in the process of putting together that meeting, setting up that first meeting. I think these are some good, high, top expertise in their area. We'll set up that meeting, give them the memo that went out to you. Part of it will be for them to talk about what they think can be the most valuable for them in terms of providing input to council. I think at this point, one of the recommendations I am going to make to them is not to talk about site specifics, and primarily because the phone is ringing now for Marathon and Ensor property in particular, and so it probably would not be appropriate at this point for a group to come and talk to you about what they think should come on there if we know that at some point in the near future, being 18, 24 months, whatever that might be, that you may get a development project or a PD amendment coming before you. And so that is moving forward. It sat on simmer for a little while, but we're going to kickstart it and get it moving at this point. So, and when they have scope and some information and they meet, we will feed back that loop to you and keep you updated on what's happening. on that front. We didn't talk about the agenda, but on August 7th, before the regular meeting, you may or may not have seen, we've got Lakewood coming in to talk about what their lessons learned were from Belmar and what's occurring right now relative to the Federal Center. So, along with Mayor Hancock and others.
So if they're coming on the 7th, that's National Night Out, so we will definitely not be starting late.
Yes, we cannot start late then because that was the date. They gave us 2 dates. I think one actually was when Mayor Hancock was coming, and that was it. So it was July 24th or August 7th. So that answers that question.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll be starting at 6 o'clock that night.
In here.
In here.
Oh, 6?
And then we'll
Okay.
move to there.
Yep.
And actually, I thought we were considering then moving the regular meeting to 7:30.
Correct.
Okay. So the regular meeting will start at 7:30, which gives us time to wrap with them and. Very good. Okay, next one. Bruce.
The council has one of the goals and objectives is a sustainability goal. And sustainability is a loaded word. But just within either the context of tonight's meeting and some other things that we have done, I just started writing down some of the topics we discussed that have elements of a sustainability or sustainable concept. We talked about nutrients and water and wastewater treatment. We've talked about, Phil mentioned economic sustainability for the community. Jerry was talking about technology, saving money versus running, all the paper we print. Jim was talking about landscaping and water usage. Didn't really mention xeriscaping, but that's certainly an element of it. Jerry mentioned shared walk bike trails, which has an element of quote-unquote sustainability. In the past, we've considered the stuff like solar, and we did the plastic bags thing as a business cost element. Peggy mentioned trash and litter, and then there was conversations about housing, and all of this has, sustainability, maybe the best way to say it in my opinion, is a dimension of the issues that we're discussing encompasses some of these elements of sustainability. What the intent of bringing this up is to do a couple of things. Basically suggest that the ultimate objective is, I think, to either direct staff to consider what might work for us, or alternately have something come back in some sort of a study session form. And it sort of works like this. Economic development is really sort of a centerpiece of what we're doing as a priority for council. And we don't have any discomfort talking about economic development. But economic development, really when it comes right down to it, is definitionally the manipulation of property and wealth to maximize short-term monetary exchange value to the owner, which is a textbook definition. But sustainability is very consistent with the root of what is economic thought process, because it's the management of, if you will, the economic household to increase value over the long run. So if economic development has a short run context, but in Littleton it actually involves redevelopment and land use as well, which are certainly sustainable concepts, which is what Phil mentioned. Then sustainability as another dimension of economic development ought to be part of our collective thought process. And we haven't really talked much about the sustainability goal that we as a council set. So it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say here is I'm not trying to channel my inner tree hugger. What I'm trying to do is bring up the issue of another orientation of the economic development construction, which I think we collectively view as critical to this community and our stewardship. And I think the conversation of what's out there in terms of what should we be doing vis-a-vis sustainability in terms of quality of life, in terms of incenting businesses, in terms of low-hanging fruit, that would be easy to theoretically implement. It doesn't have to be a solar farm, which was one of the original concepts. It doesn't have to be the plastic bag fee. Those were conversational elements or concepts for brainstorming and deliberation and discussion. But what else is out there? And again, I don't know that we have any consistent collective understanding of what sustainable alternatives are, or what things we could do to give ourselves a competitive advantage as a community, or our businesses a competitive advantages by incentivizing some level of sustainability. And therefore, I think it's worthy of further staff consideration and some sort of a study session down the road to have the deliberation.
There are, and I've heard at least one speaker from a group who preaches sustainability as an economic development driver. So maybe that is something, because there's another one I think I gave you that preaches healthy communities as an economic driver. And the healthy communities include, that's about your physical health. It's about, having a physically healthy community. So maybe that's another.
Well, I think the study session is going to be the place. I think having a reading list that might actually start with the seminal article, paper, on what started sustainability.
In electronic form.
Okay.
Okay, in electronic form. Okay, it was
That was a joke.
That was
It's getting late.
I understand.
That's pretty crumpy space.
But I might think that we also have to put it in the context of what is going to be on our municipal agenda in that, and how are we going to measure it. There was a very significant discussion at DRCOG, because sustainability is one of their they got 3 goals, and that's sustainability is one of them. And it was there, and my first question to Jennifer, their executive director, was, what do you mean by sustainability? She said, well, that's a very good question. And in this past year and a half have actually put some quantification around how does that then enter into the long-term plan. And it's not an easy discussion to get your arms around. At least that was my experience. Jim may feel a little bit differently, but getting to the point of, what is it that we want to bite off? What is it we may want to focus on, whether it's health, physical health, or it's something else. But it does, and there's only in some areas so much we can do, and to be in a position to say, geez, you have this lofty thing, but we can only pick off 2 or 3 items, at least we know what it is that we're going to push.
Yeah, I agree. I very much agree. I don't think this is not a solve world hunger issue. It's it's incremental steps, that will then build upon themselves, over 10, 15, 20 years.
Well, you rattled off a few things at the beginning. I think maybe it would be good to have an inventory of all the things that we think we're doing and have, like the pedestrian bicycle friendliness and so forth, right? That either attract businesses, retain businesses, attract residents, retain them, et cetera. Rattle off, put together all that we've got, and then brainstorm things that maybe detract that we're doing, right? It's like a negative piece. And then brainstorm beyond that. So it seems to me it might be interesting for the council, just as a group, to do this as part of a study session, give it to staff and have them mull it around more. I mean, one piece, it's a small piece that we haven't done. There's a piece, we have the solar piece that with the permits and so forth. There's a piece that Jim Thielen told me we hadn't done quite exactly all the same thing with the hot water heat piece. I'm not saying that right, the thermal piece.
Geothermal.
Oh,
Thanks.
geothermal,
No,
okay.
not geothermal, just the thermal piece. So if you put hot water on your roof to heat your house or to,
Oh, from a
you know,
permitting standpoint?
yeah, but whatever it is, there's one piece he said we hadn't quite done, and I'd asked him to put it forth to us, but I think it's going to come to us now with the annual update of the building code stuff, that he's going to bring it forth then. It's a minor thing.
Sure.
But if that would encourage people to use that, gas right now is a big issue. So for people in houses that have hot water heat, this would be a great benefit, just another incentive, or a business that's taking over a building that has hot water heat, right, to help with that. So I'm just thinking of brainstorming as many things as we can just for leverage, and possibly this might be an interesting way to phrase some kind of question for the symposium. Hey, what are you guys doing? What do you, that you think in that realm that you think is helping attract or retain business?
Yeah, and hard dollar kind of stuff. I mean, we know like Long Business Systems does a lot of the green building commercial stuff, and they're pretty successful. And we know, for example, ACC has their solar tech studies stuff where they're training people in terms of doing solar installations. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff floating around out there, but again, there's certain things you can get tax credits at the state or federal level for, the window kind of stuff.
But we're also keeping this sort of a secret, not totally, from other people.
Right, and maybe the issue ends up being, to your point, it ends up on the website, maybe we've got a tab for, Green Littleton or some such thing, I don't know.
So are we going study session, regular meeting? What are we doing here?
Hold on, Bruce.
Well, I was just going to say, I appreciate, the academic, high-level discussion, but really, how does it come back to what is our role in local government, and how do we influence these things? We do the appropriate things, such as the South Platte Working Group trying to save the river and save the Highline Canal, because they matter so much to the quality of life, and those things take up a tremendous amount of time. As you begin to look at other ways that you might be able to influence sustainability things, I think you have to look at, is it worth the appropriate use of the time of local government? And so I like the discussion, I like the idea of thinking out of the box, but I want to come back to the reality of, what is the role of local government and what can we influence, and try to keep it grounded.
Good. Okay, Michael?
I don't want to get beat.
He's already mentioned nunchucks tonight.
Yeah. Ride your bike?
So the council, Councilman Beckman's question, I think, is the policy question for the council, because there is so much that has been implemented in local government across the state over at least the last 10 years, if not more than this. I mean, there's energy efficient codes that have gone in the built environment. It started with the local governments probably 10 or 15 years ago retrofitting their own buildings. We've obviously done a lot of work there. Then it rolled out into the residential, and you had the energy codes come into play, and you were building in a more sustainable manner. You have now architects out there in the world who know how to design a home using less wood, south-facing material, or south-facing to use more lights, all of that kind of stuff. That's out there. It's being done. Some local governments have chosen to help it happen in their communities by requiring it. And you have energy code, and you get points for it, and you got to meet certain amount of points in order to get approval for your building permit. It then moved into the commercial world, and with this came the grants and the tax credits and all of that. So depending upon what you believe the role of local government is in sustainability, because you also have the people side of it in terms of transit, making sure we have good transit, making sure that we bike paths, et cetera, all the stuff you know about. We don't need to invent the wheel here. What we need to do is have the council decide what is it that you want to get involved in, because from a sustainability, just from a core sustainability on the earth environment, most of our energy use is in buildings. You could spend all the resources and energy and time on nothing but retrofitting the existing buildings. Do you want to provide a service that goes out there, work with a nonprofit that will go and do the pressure test for the house to see where the energy is leaking, and then subsidize blowing in
Insulation.
insulation and fixing those gaps? I mean, there's some really low-hanging fruit if that's the role that you play. It's mandating responsibility onto the property owner. So obviously, again, not a discussion for tonight, but this is not something that you have to theorize and philosophize around. We can get copies of existing code that's out there. We can drill right down and see where you guys are comfortable with in terms of implementing in the built environment. So.
Okay.
Set up for a study session.
Yep. All right, that's it. Anything else? Anybody?
Studies.
Adjourned. Yay.